When the Castle will
I can have the
redo
website.
Then it's put off the
Yeah.
property then.
Okay.
Then it's a whole different kettle of gas. Properties- Yeah. But if it's once it's off the property on the summit, like if you come off the driveway onto the summit, you can't fall.
Are we it today?
Well,
Yeah, Ely won't be here.
Yeah, you know he's in California, so.
He just walked in.
Okay.
Well, I agree with that rule completely. You know, just because some people think certain jobs are safe, other jobs are
By the way, guys, tonight is the open house for Town Hall expansion, and Matt, I thought an email, did I miss it was
This
going
is
to go
the
out?
digest.
Okay, yeah,
But it's been going out around, I
okay.
mean, it's been going out on,
You know, town board's encouraged to be there and listen. Okay, good. At where? Oh, good. Oh, I thought he said grueling, too.
I did too.
Okay,
I
okay.
would go to that.
No, I'd rather, this could be good.
This could be the grueling part, that could be the grueling part.
Get together, it's been about a year, right? We get together, meetings.
Right, but it's not the same, right? Just like- So you could go afterwards. Well, some of them don't last a long, Berg after some don't last a long.
He's just like older.
Oh, just older, just older. And he left early, he did leave early too, because he didn't come home to leave it. So he went complaining, where's my car? It's raining. I said,
I worked with him in Rocky Flats.
oh, did he work at Rocky Flats? Oh, but yeah, he every time he comes in, Dr. Coffee was probably, and he always says, I can do this, I will try, and then not too long after.
That's fine. Good morning. How are you?
Why do you always say, look, there's no range? And I said, because we have this other assignment. We have this whole area, here's a study, this is the thing on natural life people. He says, that's some of those.
Specifically, talking about budgets. We also talked about
Thank you again this morning. Let's go ahead and proceed with our budget review of the 2017 budget. I think we're ready to go on the governmental CIP. So a quick summary of the revenues that fund this particular program. About $1 million a year comes from the dedicated 0.3% sales and use tax we have for this particular program. And really, absent any kind of one-time infusion of other monies, the additional funding for this program comes from any remaining funds we have left over in the general fund, any surplus in the general fund. So in 2017, that's estimated at $2 million as well. There are a couple of one-time revenues, and I think actually Trustee Dozell maybe even brought this up in the last formal board meeting, but we've gotten a grant. Alex has secured a grant from Dr. Cog to do some improvements on our traffic signals, so you'll see some corresponding expenses associated with that. You'll see some of these one-time fees coming in: park impact, school impact, public facility fees. those are the one-time revenues associated with the new development, that issue we talked about yesterday, where the new development is estimated to bring in $19 million over a 5-year period of time. Revenues such as these fall into that particular category. We have some loans identified that we talked about briefly. You're going to start to see some yellow highlights in this particular documents, and what those will be are changes from the initial proposed budget that went out October 1st. So, for example, as a result of our dialogue yesterday specific to the North Pool cover, I think there was direction to essentially push that project out 1 year. That would be the estimated revenue component, the operating expense component, as well as the capital funding and the loan for the capital funding. So again, yellow starts to identify changes. And if I got that wrong, if we didn't agree to push that project out, please let me know as it relates to that. So if there are no questions on revenues, we'll just jump into expenses. Okay, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. Well, I just have a question about that grant. Since it's for Louisville and Superior, do we need to do anything? Do we have to have an agreement with Louisville or anything on that traffic signaling grant? I mean, and it doesn't matter to me. We'll take the money because I think we control the grant. I just wondered if we have to account for it because the traffic signaling grant.
So, Alex, we're talking about the revenues, and one of the revenue is that $142,000 grant. I was under the assumption that was for work on our side only, but is there some?
That's for the whole thing, yeah.
That's the total grant, and I just got notified by Dr. Cog about starting the process, and I'll probably have to get with Louisville. So this number may change and may be divided up between Louisville and Superior. So, but that's a total amount.
Right. That's exactly right. It's a total amount. I think we should control the project, and that's what Louisville believes now. At least Ashley Stoltzman believes that. She's the Dr. Cog representative for Louisville, and I think that's what we should go under the assumption that we're controlling the grant. But it is from Via Appia Way in Louisville on McCaslin all the way up to Rock Creek Parkway. Okay. So I don't think splitting it is necessarily, well, I don't know, you decide how to do it, but I do think we need to recognize that money will be spent as well for work done in the Louisville side as well as our own.
No, good point. So it sounds like prior to the final budget adoption in October, hopefully Alex will have some clarification. So we may see some tweaks both to revenue and expenses associated with this project.
And one thing, it is 100% grant for the equipment, but they don't fund installation. So there may be, and I've budgeted about $50,000 for single upgrades for this project and others. So there may be installation, and really the key thing is connecting the traffic signal from Marshall McCaslin to Town Hall. So we need a physical connection or a radio connection. So I've budgeted some funds for that. So there are some additional funds other than the
and that's understandable. At least we don't have to do the 20 or 30% grant. Right. I mean match that most of these other projects require.
Paul, can you address the park impact fee, the bond loan proceeds for Town Hall, and then the bond loan proceeds for El Dorado Park?
Certainly. So the first item, line 21, park impact fee, we assess a $3,000 per home impact fee for new building here in town to assist with funding those new amenities. That started recently with Remington and Coal Creek Crossing, and we've applied that then to any new developments to essentially help with funding any new park amenities.
Okay. So we didn't do that in the past? I see in 2014 there was $3,000, but it jumps up to $285,000 in 2017.
Right, and again, that fee essentially started actually with the Remington division and the subdivision improvement agreement we passed with them in the late 2000s, 2008, 2009. So it was essentially with the new building cycle that we've started here in the last half decade or so. We've started to implement that fee, and we collect that. So we agreed with Remington we'd start in 2008, 2009, but the actual mechanism for collection is when they pull their building permit. So that's why you
Oh,
didn't
okay.
see it until 2014.
Got it. And then, are we doing the same thing for the town center homes as well?
That is correct. Well, for any new residential that are assumed in that kind of 5-year construction. So, Rogers Farm and Town Center, any new residential.
And this ties to that 170 some odd homes estimated to be in the town center in 2018, 2019?
Right, those homes plus
Yeah,
the addition, any other additional new residential.
Okay. And then the bond loan proceeds for Town Hall Addition and the El Dorado Park. The El Dorado Park, is that where we borrowed money from a different fund to get this done in the first year, and then we're just paying it back?
That's exactly correct. So this year, to accelerate the construction of the El Dorado KA Park, we borrowed $2 million from the Open Space Fund. So that's what the $2 million in revenue represents, and we'll be paying that off. And Jeff will have that down below, but it's $1 million a pop in 17 and 18 to pay that back, or $1 million plus a little bit of interest. So that's that line right there.
Okay, that was the next question. What kind of interest do you pay?
We
back?
look at, so this is 1%, which is, the estimate was roughly equal to what our portfolio return,
Yeah.
our investment
So
portfolio
below what
return
market
is.
rate would be? but
I'm sorry?
Below what the market would be?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Now, what about the bond loan proceeds for Town Hall? I didn't know that we were borrowing money from a fund, so where is that coming from?
So we are looking for the town loan specifically, and then I'll extend it out to if in fact we borrow for the North Pool and potentially even the Windy Gap firming. We would use either the municipal bond market for that, or more recently we've been able to interest banks in loaning us some funds. Typically, the sweet spot is relatively low, below 10 million, shorter period of time, 10 years or less. Bank financing is very, very attractive, very inexpensive. So that's probably where we would look to do that.
Okay, so if we move forward with the Town Hall expansion, we're actually borrowing money for that and not taking it out of reserves or anything?
That is correct. So you'll see the bond proceeds up here, and then you'll see a loan payment down below.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Just, go ahead.
Okay, regarding the North Pool cover, I just wanted to add that I am not in favor of pushing that to 2018, but what I did hear yesterday was that the majority of the board was, so I will concede that I'm in the minority on that opinion. I am glad that it's on the table. I'm glad that it's being discussed. I think we do have to put these things in budgets at certain points to get discussions moving, and if this is what it's taken to get it moving and we can have a good process and get it done in 2018, then I guess that's better than never. But I just wanted to state for the record that I think it could be done in 2017. I'd like to see it done in 2017, but I also hear my fellow board members, and we'll go that direction.
Well, but that wasn't my direction on that, and I don't think that was Elia's either. My suggestion was that we leave it in the budget, but we have the community outreach, and we see if the community really wants it. And if the community says, no, we don't want it, then we push it out to another year or something else. But if the community, if ProStack does the outreach in the first quarter of the year, that overwhelmingly we want to have a bubble over the North Pool, then we've got the money to do it. We can move forward with it. So,
Well, our suggestion was to push it out because community engagement takes a while.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
but I don't think we want to, prefer not to shut down one of our outdoor pools during the summer. And construction in the winter is tough,
Got
so
it. Okay.
that was our reasoning.
I
Well, and
think
we've-
it's just a timing, it's not that, so much that not wanting to take up the question, but taking up the question of whether or not to do it involves a lot of things. I mean, even we talked yesterday about the survey that was done about indoor space, and what about an indoor pool versus a covered pool? All of that working together and considering that, this isn't just a singular issue of should we put a cover on the North Pool. It's got to be interwoven into all of the other considerations. So I think, and the people throw around rec center and all that. There's so many
things that could go into play of whether or not we did the North Pool. And I think, like Matt said, it's going to take, by the time we'd be ready to have made a decision, it's time to open the pool again for the summer
Yeah,
of 2017.
but I wouldn't expect us to be done with the community engagement in time to construct a cover at the beginning of the summer. I would think that we would, by the time we were done with it, and if it passed, if everybody wanted to do it, and we put bids out for the project, that it's going to happen sometime next fall or the winter time. So after the pool shut down. So
The other thing I would say is, because we are doing a bank loan placement or some other financing for this, we can always amend the budget. If the board decided
Yep.
after the summer, this is something we want to do, let's move forward, Paul could work out the arrangements for financing, we could get the construction contract under, we can do that still next year
Yep.
and be under construction.
Well, the new piece for me, and I think a lot of the board members yesterday, was this idea of a new fee structure for aquatics. And that, we definitely have gotten ourselves used to things for free, whether it's the pool or the yard waste or large item pickup. And when you take those free things away from people, it causes a lot of angst. We all love things cheap and free, but someone's paying for that, and so we really need to dive into that further. And maybe the answer is we come up with the money somewhere else and we still make it free, even though it's year round, or maybe we look at a new fee structure, or maybe something in between. But all of that's got to be figured out, and that's a lot more discussion. So I get
I'm
that we.
content with putting it in 2018 because there are so many moving parts. There are a rewriting of policy considerations if we go down that path. I also would ask that when the, I don't know who on staff is going to direct ProStack about how to tackle this issue. The board needs to be involved early on in that process to look at that action plan to make sure all the elements we want addressed by ProStack are on that action plan. I go back to the El Dorado K-8 process. We spent a lot of time on it, but some of it was a little bit off track because it took a little bit different bent than necessarily the board had thought it would take. So let's keep this whole process as much on track as possible to meet the requirements, if you will, of this board in terms of the deliberations and the considerations that need to take place. And let's try to move along just as efficiently as we can.
Yep.
Okay.
So, in order to do that, we'll, I guess, give direction to ProStack to implement it into their meeting schedule. But do we need to spend any money against that to put together this community outreach to see if we want to do a bubble or some other?
Yeah, I think
Something
Paul
else.
and Jeff had conversations yesterday about putting some funds in the budget for study or facilitation
Right.
expenses.
I'd like to add some, too, that tied in, number one, tied in with that, probably should be intermeshed, is the decision of whether to have a ballot issue on a rec center coming up too.
Right.
And that, secondly, just to not minimize the fact that you're going to have a half-new board coming on board, joining the decision-making process. And I can tell you, going back to 2008, as a new board member and stepping in, and one of the hot issues that, if my memory serves correctly, was that we were hit with right off the bat was the land swap, if you remember back in history. And as a new board member, I don't think I fully appreciated the lack of engagement on that decision-making. And I think any new board member needs to be more versed in the issues involving the pool cover, possible ballot issue, and not force this through too fast. I think easily it's going to take 2017 to do it right, in my opinion.
Matt, how much did you guys discuss of putting in there for this study?
Yeah, Patrick's saying we spent $20,000 on.
Which,
To where we're at right now, we've spent $20,000 with Green Play and consultants just to get us to where we are right now without
just the pool.
That'd be
the pool cover.
The feasibility of it,
Yeah.
the feasibility idea, yeah.
But not the community outreach, I
No.
don't think. That's just the concept of, the potential concept of a cover.
Doesn't make sense.
So the community outreach is one thing, and I can't imagine that would be too costly, but I think the bigger issue is going to be, we have to go back to that extensive survey that we put out about the indoor rec needs. That survey has, from my perspective, too much data in it, too much information. It's almost too hard to understand. But we need to go back and really analyze that. There is a lot of information there, and how do we actually utilize that data best? So I don't think that gives us a clear picture that there is a need for an indoor pool. I think it gives us a clear picture that there is a need for rec space, indoor rec space, but then how do we take it to the next step and include the pool and all that? So I think that there's going to be a reasonable amount of money that needs to be spent to really understand that data and what the next steps are going to be.
And I think we need to stop saying need instead of it's a want or a desire. It's not a
Thank you.
need, it's a
Thank
want
you.
or a desire. And that needs to be very clear. Need is one
Well,
thing. Need
this-
is not really part of this discussion.
This is why this board needs to be a key part of the determination of what the assignment to ProStack is, to make sure all these things. Another element is the outdoor pool space we currently have sufficient? And will it continue to be sufficient as we add 1,400 homes here and 50 here and 40 there, et cetera, et cetera? So it's multifaceted. You need to have a methodology to consider all these things up front so that the results you get answer some questions. If you're non-specific up front, you're going to get a bunch of gobbledygook at the end. So, there are companies like the one that helped Louisville with the rec center considerations and that whole thing. There are companies that specialize in these specific things. I would hope we would maybe contact them to see how they'd approach this and, do it right.
Why don't we continue this pool and direction discussion at the next retreat, just because we need to keep going through the budget.
Keep
Well,
going,
no,
but
we
we
have
need
to
to have
address the
some kind of
policy
budget
issue.
item on here too. So if we're going to move forward with something, if we're saying we'll wait until 2018, that's great, but 2018 is going to come and then we don't have any kind of budget. We haven't done any of the pre-planning or anything, so I think we need to budget something. So
Well, I think that moving it to 18 presupposes the fact that we're going to take 2017 to work it.
Yeah.
So
So
you're
how much
right, we
money
have
is
to
in the
give direction to
2017?
That's
start
right.
working it
yeah,
now.
so this is a
Okay.
budget process, so
Yeah.
we need to put something in the budget if we're going to move forward with this. And I think that we need to put a little more than a little less in there for this
Okay.
process.
I think we have.
Paul Nilsson and I were just chatting kind of based off of where we're at now in the process. And what I think we're hearing is probably that 45 to 50 number if we're looking for public engagement with tying in some other elements, if ballot initiative gets discussed or a facility other than just covering the North Pool gets
'Cause
discussed.
We've done a lot of work
Yeah.
on this
Mhm,
already.
Right.
The survey.
And
the
costs,
region-
you've done a lot of cost
Yeah,
analysis of
and
potential sites.
actually what the facility could
We toured-
include and look
We
like.
toured other
Yeah.
facilities. It'll be
So-
interesting also to see how Louisville's ballot turns out here in a couple of months, their $25 million ballot for their enhanced rec center. There is on the ballot for this year.
Yes.
I'm sorry, in the next couple of months. And, but there's a lot of work, and that's all the moving parts, I think, like Sandy said. And there's so many things that are out there we talked about. We can't think of it as a singular issue. We have to piece it together. And I think that when we talk about pools for the town of Superior, we have to keep in mind that it's always been a moving target. And even when the town center was being proposed by the developer did not want to put any pools in. There were many people that wanted a pool put in for the town, not just for the town center, but for the town. Well, it ended up that, no, that wasn't a need or a requirement for the developer. And so now we sit here and start talking about whether or not we need to put a pool in for the 1,400 potential residential units in the town center. I don't think that should be a part of this discussion. It's for the residents that have been here and that are currently here, not the ones that may come here, that we really be thinking about.
You can't
Well, I'm not separating them out.
ignore
I'm not ignoring them,
overcrowding the pools for the 1,400.
but they're
people that-
overcrowded now, not because of the
They
1,400.
aren't always
Okay,
overcrowded.
so what
They're
I,
overcrowded.
so what I heard was a $50,000 number, so we'll plug that in for studies, but I do think we
I
need to.
think that's reasonable.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, so let's plug that in, and there are a lot of details left to hash out, but we'll have to do that at maybe the next retreat. Okay,
So one more question down on that park impact fee. That goes into the SIP budget? Do those funds ever find their way into park projects? They do? Yeah. Is it earmarked for park projects, the park impact fee, or does it go wherever needed?
That's the idea, is it goes towards park improvements. So, like Remington Homes, park impact fee, I don't remember if we use that to offset the Founders Park costs or if they're helping. I think they were the Founders Park.
Yeah, again, the logic is, a lot of these parks that we're building now are larger, regional amenities. I may be using the wrong terminology here, and I apologize, but yeah, I mean, these monies go for, the tail end, yes, to the improvement at Founders Park, and they went for, the Eldo K8, and, and any other particular park needs we may have.
Yeah. Because I've only, heard of Conservation Trust and Open Space Fund. I've never heard of some chunk of change called park impact fees in terms of, so.
We haven't had a lot of new residential
Yeah.
until recently,
but
so
will
yeah.
there be
Yeah.
a designation, and those monies won't go to repaving some residential street?
No, the intent is
Okay.
they would go to parks. And it's actually a pretty typical municipal impact fee, just to give you some level of comfort.
Paul, just to be clear, you're going to move that $2.8 million for the bond loan proceeds North Pool cover to 2018, but you're going to leave $50K or so for 2017 for a study to see what we want to do.
That is correct. So when we get down to that project, Jeff will make sure to plop that in there.
Thanks.
Any other revenue questions? On the expenditure side, what we've done in the past will be to focus primarily on the projects coming up in 2017, and maybe if there are some, larger, more important projects in the future, staff can identify it, but primarily focus on 2017. With the materials that you were provided, either electronically or on paper, in early August, part of the supplemental budget report had a detailed sheet on each particular project as well to help you with your particular review. But staff essentially will just kind of go down this list, focusing on the more current projects. So, Alex, if you want to start, please.
Okay, starting at the top, Rock Creek Parkway, pedestrian flashing beacons. There's one location down by Bell Flatirons, down by Safeway, that we wanted to put in. We were going to put in part of that Rock Creek Parkway reconstruction, but that more or less got postponed, so we want to do that next year. Also, the TSC had a discussion about rapid flashing beacons at 88th and Rock Creek Parkway. That's not in here, although I think I may be able to fund it out of 88th Shamrock Peg Crossing. I do have some funds left over there, so.
And that's something you're going to do this year, though, right?
That, yes. So I may take some funds out of there, but that came up at the TSC meeting to put a rapid flashing device at that right turn.
Can you address the Campus Drive connection? Because we have the pedestrian bridge now, correct?
Right. So that came up at one of the town board meetings about, are we going to do that? And what we budgeted here is about half the cost of about a 30% design to see the feasibility, to establish alignment and go far enough so we have a cost estimate for that project. And I think that was discussed at the joint.
Yeah, that
Yeah, it was
was,
at the joint
Right.
breakfast, we talked about
Yeah.
that for Louisville, right?
Louisville has nothing in their foreseeable budget.
although I did send, they were interested, they were going to consider it when we talked to them at the Joint Issues Committee, and I sent the city manager what we were budgeting for this 30% design, and then they were going to discuss it with their council.
The other thing is that we have to get with Dr. Cog, because we can get bridges built out of Dr. Cog funds. So we should make a meeting. I'm looking at Alex and Matt both, but I brought that up about there's new bridges because they're falling apart. You know, there's federal funding now when before it was more transportation related, you know. And since Dr. Cog is about connecting communities, that the Dr. Cog staff told me absolutely positively, let's get it in the works, you know, for the next TIP, Transportation Improvement Project funding. So it would be 4 years out, but we wouldn't probably plan on building that bridge before then anyway, but we need to talk about that.
Sure.
With Dr. Cog, how we get it into the next TIP,
That's
Transportation
right.
Improvement.
And they've also just come out with a call for the 2040 projects on the transportation plan. So that's another step. If we can get it in on that plan, then it's easier to get it in the TIP
Right.
down the road. So
Right.
we'll be pursuing those avenues.
Okay.
For our major street repair program, we have about $1 million budgeted a year. It doesn't go very far these days. For next year, what we'd like to do is resurfacing of McCaslin. Once the roundabout is built, north and south of the roundabout, we want to complete that up to Rock Creek Parkway. We won't get through the intersection, but that would be the next step. So we have a fairly new facility on McCaslin from Rock Creek Parkway all the way to the interchange. So that's what's planned for next year. The $80,000 for the soft cost, we'll design that. On our street maintenance, these are our pothole repairs, concrete repairs, and so forth. We've upped that from previous years because some of our major arterials are getting fairly old, and we need to up that. Then we have vehicle replacement. That's actually for 2 spreader boxes on our pickups. Bridge rail painting, we have 2 structures on Rock Creek Parkway with the bridge rails, and so we want to start programming those. We did one on McCaslin, though, 4 or 5 years ago. The traffic signal upgrades, so this is the $142,000, and that's supplemented by another $30,000 for upgrades. And that'll be in conjunction with Louisville. And that's about it for me.
Just a kind of handful of smaller projects proposed for pros this year. You can see line 60. So staff's getting ready to bring forward an FDP for Parks 1 and 2 plus the Creek Corridor Enhancement Plan. This budgeted amount here would allow us to take the FDP to construction documents as well as begin the permitting process to do the work in the Coal Creek corridor. So this is just kind of the finishing touches on the project that we're bringing forward here in September. Moving down below that, the $25,000 for the historic fire truck interior. Exterior's looking great. The interior's kind of in the same condition. Hole in the floorboard, don't have seat belts.
There's also possibly a exhaust system issue.
And we have determined that with this amount, we should be able to do the interior and the exhaust system to just make it run a little more stable.
That seems like a lot. So the interior is I can't remember, is it just the front end? There's no back seat or anything like that?
Right.
Needs
It's
to be rolled
probably
and pleated.
Tuck and roll?
Yeah. I think a lot of that is probably going to go towards restoring the metal that's missing on the inside. Most of it's
Okay.
kind of just exposed.
Yep, okay.
But like I said, the exhaust repair should be able to fit within that number, as well as using as many original parts to the time period. That's driven the cost a little bit. So moving down to line 62, we had originally plugged in this number of 175 to put a dedicated pickleball court, actually up by the existing tennis courts. There's kind of a small alcove where there's some trees and a seating area now, where a single pickleball court would be able to fit in. This item's actually had a fair amount of controversy. I wouldn't say that it's probably fully supported by ProStack. I won't speak for ProStack, but it wasn't a priority for them in the one of our ProStack meetings. We've chose to leave it on there to just bring it forward as a discussion.
So I only recall this ever coming before one member to the board from one member of the community asking for it. I don't know if there's more support that I'm not aware of. That's
So this is one of the questions that I had. It was in these pages. Are we going to go through these pages also? Or?
Not unless you have a question.
Okay, so I'll address it now. The question was pickleball court. Is this something that there's a high demand for? I mean, and this isn't based on my meetings with ProStack or anything like that, but it's just, I don't really hear a lot of talk in the community about having pickleball. And are we going to spend $175,000 on something that's going to be used for the first couple of months of a summer? And then from that point forward, it's really not going to be used at all.
Well, I thought was, we have an aging community, and in general, and
Joe resembles that remark.
a lot of seniors like to play pickleball, and we could do pickleball on our tennis courts, but then that takes away from people that want to use the tennis courts, and we have a high demand for tennis courts as well. So our thought was, if it's, it's an additional amenity that others in the community would like to use or could use.
Have we talked about bocce ball and, all those kinds of
We're having bocce ball
things?
in the new
Right.
park.
So-
some of this actually stemmed from, not fitting it in at the El Dorado, the park next to the school. Bocce will be included. There are some opportunities, like, as the manager said, to stripe the existing court, but I think that will probably get some pushback from the existing
Sure.
residents.
Yeah,
who use tennis.
I don't know. To put bocce ball in, it's pretty simple to do, I think. But to dedicate a court and pour cement and stripe it and have something dedicated for one sport that we don't know if it's really in demand or not, I don't know.
Didn't we also say that
we are
included
proposing it
Eldorado
for
in
17.
basketball? I
It was
thought-
asked
But
for there.
we
Yeah,
can push it
on the
out,
basketball court.
to future year if the board wants to, more time to consider it.
Yeah, I would support pushing it out to 18, because
I didn't know pickleball from a hole in the wall until a couple of years ago, when in fact it was brought to our attention, and there was some eagerness to supply it because of its increasing popularity in the region. So that's how I heard about it. And then when it was not included in the El Dorado Park concept, I heard from some residents that wanted it involved. Whether or not that, I've never played pickleball, but I would like to see this tackled by ProStack and sort of, a recommendation coming out of ProStack as to whether yes and where
Yeah.
is appropriate. I don't have any problem which budget year it is, as long as we understand, again, that it's a placeholder that may or may not be spent based on recommendations that emerge. So I found it intriguing just based, I don't know when that all, remember when it all came? Was it in the like Park 3 maybe? And
Yep. It was definitely
or something.
brought up
There
as
was a
part of the
fairly
discussion in town
extensive
center.
conversation at some point about this. So,
Yeah, I agree, Stan. I think that it should go to ProStack. I mean, we spent 2+ years in ProStack deciding and discussing whether we should put a shelter, an additional shelter in Purple Park. So to all of a sudden put in a pickleball court without really having to go through that process, I think that's a significant amount of money.
Mhm.
So I think that we can leave it there, it's fine, but I think that we should, again, go back to ProStack and have them evaluate it, whether that's something we really want to have.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, so are we leaving it or are we pushing it?
I don't have a problem leaving it, but again, I think it has to go through a process to determine if we want to spend it or not.
So I would say, yeah, push it.
out?
I mean, the process
Doesn't
is
mind
going
me.
to take a while,
Good.
so.
It's fine.
well, and another element that I don't want to lose sight of with pickleball consideration is we've got these decrepit tennis courts at El Dorado K8 in the back. And
That's El Dorado K8's
Not
though.
ours.
Yeah, but, you know, I want to not lose track of this collaboration discussion that I thought was still underway on a turf field that would be used for school purposes and when schools closed, for community purposes. And so the question is, if we collaborated with them on those decrepit courts back there, could the pickleball concept be implemented back there for significantly less, because you've got the space, you've got some of the infrastructure in
Too many
place?
seniors.
Not a bad idea, because if the concern is striping our primary tennis courts is going to be an issue with the tennis court users, I can't imagine that 7th and 8th graders are going to have a big issue with some striping for
Have you seen
pickleball.
how their
Yes,
half
they're bubbling
basketball
and-
courts are currently I mean, they play everything on those things.
So maybe but again, that's something that maybe ProStack could determine.
That's right,
How
and that,
how bad are those tennis courts? Are they
Pretty
like
rotten.
cracked and-
Yeah.
They're- They like bubble and
only kids would play on them right now.
extreme tennis.
But again, in a town gown sort of relationship, you know, maybe we can improve the amenities for our school kids while providing some off hours used for the community.
So we're going to move that one out then.
Okay.
Okay. But then give direction to ProStack to look into it. Okay.
Moving down a line to dog park renovation, a fairly small project, but I think a fairly significant project is we're probably due to look at upgrading the sod, replacing huge sections of the sod in that dog park. It's looking green now, but it's looking green mostly because some of the weed overgrowth. I think if we want to maintain the standard of that dog park being a grass dog park, every so often we're probably going to need to go in, shut it down, re-sod it, let it sit for a week or two to establish. That 65 would also include removing some of the pea gravel up at the front and adjusting the irrigation system. A lot of that pea gravel has kind of migrated, contributing to killing the grass.
So, Patrick, back when that was installed, we had yin and yang on, you know, the gravel versus the grass. And so we went with the grass knowing that there were going to be some problems with it. If you could do it now in the perfect manner, having the several years of experience with it, should it have been gravel, or are you content with it being grass?
I think grass is it's a great amenity. We hear very positive comments about the dog park. I just the usage is really significant, which is great. And I think we just need to long-term plan for some restoration, probably a little more than we're doing now.
Okay.
We've tried at a couple different points to section off the dog park to let one side rest, but we put the fence up and it seems to get cut down as soon as we put it up.
I have a question about, we've talked and talked again, but we haven't done anything about it or given direction about the disc golf area that's not being used and possibly extending the access for dogs and off-leash or whatever. So where is that, or is that in here anywhere?
That is currently not in this budget. We have met with the gentleman that designed the disc golf course to either look at a future course, maybe along Rock Creek and Community Park, and even a temporary seasonal course that would be in Purple Park.
Right. Like where the women's was, that was great. that
Correct,
one.
and
was
we've
really
just
nice.
started
Really
to
nice.
discuss some of those items with
Hazardous
ProStack, but it's,
charges.
we didn't have a solid number. It's not a huge number to move the course or redesign it, probably less than 10,000.
Okay, well, I just think we need to make sure that we know that that's got to happen.
Yeah.
You know, understanding what happens with the disc golf, because it's not being utilized now.
Before we go down the road of just eliminating it or moving it, it'd be nice if we could reach out to the disc golf community, because they held an event there. I knew at least one event, a tournament, and maybe a couple, and John Bird had come in and done some
Yeah.
classes there. It'd be nice if we could reach out to them and say, hey, any chance you guys would be interested in doing tournaments here? And if not, then I say, yeah, then we look into moving it. But, you know, that was an Eagle Scout project done by an Eagle Scout in our community, and, you know, there's some sentimental value there, and I think that.
Well, but have you looked at it lately?
I understand.
Yeah, it's pretty
Well, plus
bad.
the dogs use it now. And
Yeah, my understanding
pretty
it's a
bad.
doggy
Official
toilet.
dog.
So it'd be nice if we could
Yeah.
at least try and
Mhm.
generate some activity there, but if we can't, then yeah, let's do something productive with it.
We have a space that's ours
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the town,
That's
let's
right. Yep.
use it. And everybody's clamoring for more space for the dogs to run free, so then let's.
I'm not there yet.
Well, I'm not saying that, I'm saying they're clamoring, that doesn't mean we've approved it.
Right.
But even if we expand the dog park, still, you know, I don't know what it is, but let's use it more
It could be a nice
effectively.
natural open space area too for walking. I run and walk to Flatirons Mall through there. It's
Yeah.
really a nice path.
It
It is a great path, and I see people sit along that path, but they have their dogs out there running in
Or in
this
the-
dog area, this golf area. But the one, when the women's disc golf was along Rock Creek Parkway and Purple
Yep.
Park there,
Yeah,
it
that
was
was really nice.
wonderful.
And they have approached us about bringing that tournament back next
Okay.
year,
Okay.
which would be great.
I just didn't want to lose sight, it's one of those other things about, we haven't really officially or formally, according to ProStack, given them the go-ahead to look into this. Well, maybe we have now, but let's not lose sight of that in the 2017 plan.
Sure.
Patrick, this is
Yeah.
under revenue, and I should have asked this earlier, but I do have in my notes. Just in the fees for the parks, under parks and recreation fees, you show all the different parks, the fees for nonprofits, residents, and non-residents. And in here, you have Founders Park Multipurpose Field at, you know, there's an hourly rate. And I thought that field is not programmable, and if it's not, perhaps it shouldn't be on here.
When we allowed the baseball teams,
Okay?
the little guys to use the baseball field, that's when that number and fee kind
So
of
can we
generally got
change
approved.
that? Because I interpret that as I can go out and program
Sure.
the grass area.
Sure.
So can we change that to T-ball field or baseball field or whatever? And then on the next page, under shelters, you have the different shelters listed except for the one in Founders Park. And that one we do program, and there is a fee for that on certain days.
Right,
So maybe we should add that there with the fee schedule.
sure. Yep, we can absolutely make those changes.
Okay, thanks. That's-
Yeah. Moving down below Dog Park, restoration, you'll see two projects that are actually kind of separated out, but both relating to Williams Turf Field and the upgrades that we made this year. Those of you who are down there frequently, you know that the entryway to the stairs on Williams Field is a crusher fine. A lot of the issues that we ran into with Williams Field over time is that crusher fine ends up getting on the stairs and then slowly carries out into the field.
It's already building up.
Yep.
Silt on the corner there.
It silts in the field, and then
Yeah.
it rains, and then that portion of the field gets significantly harder than the rest. This would be a plan to probably use some kind of paver system. We've got some topography over there where we've got some curves and bends, but we do feel like we need to get the crusher fine removed from the field and the sidewalk and probably put something in a little more sturdy, or we're going to continue to damage that corner of the field. And then the project right below that is the Williams Field scoreboard replacement. The existing scoreboard,
never
it doesn't work.
Has it ever worked?
It's worked off and on. I think
It's
it was a
patchwork.
prototype. Yeah, our guys spend a lot of time just piecemealing it together with the sports groups. So this would be a full scoreboard replacement. And
Is it really needed?
we have a lot of requests
Okay.
from everything from football, soccer, rugby.
Yeah.
We have had a couple of colleges use our field for lacrosse, and there are certain requirements on your scoreboard for those games to be eligible. So that's what those two projects are. The Williams entrance improvements would also factor in a drive aisle into Scanlon baseball field where we do a lot of our events. We've, over the years, have really damaged and rutted up that corner of the field just as part of our events. So this would go to stabilize and remove that crusher fine as well. Line 66, $17,000. For a turf groomer, this would be a dedicated piece of machinery that would basically vacuum, groom, and even out the crumb rubber
Yep.
on Williams Field. This would be a machine that our staff would use. It would be under our control. We wouldn't end up having a contractor come out about once a year. We're paying a couple $1,000s just to have somebody come out and really just vacuum the field. This piece of equipment here would kind of do the vacuuming, the grooming, the redistribution of the crumb rubber. So kind of an all-in-one maintenance item that would be under our control as opposed to
Yep.
a contractor.
This doesn't have to be in the budget, but it just as an aside, the watering system around Williams Field has to have some attention on where they're aiming. I've been
Okay.
there where the turf field's getting watered, and I don't think you want that.
Well, we do.
Yeah,
you
It's
do.
in
It's
certain
hot.
times of the year.
Yeah.
No, not fire hoses like these things.
Well, and there's also an issue because that's non-potable water, which is actually, if we were to
Oh.
really spray that water with non-pot, you'd get quite a bit of fungus
Yeah.
and growth under there. So as we've looked at potentially watering down that field, just from previous conversations, in addition to not probably having the infrastructure we need, the water source would actually allow bacteria growth in that crumb rubber, which we would want to avoid. But we'll make sure that we follow up with.
Just to add to
Realignment.
the turf groomer, I think that's two things. The importance of that is the longevity of the field, but also maintaining a sufficient Gmax rating.
Correct.
If it gets unevenly distributed, then you have spots of the field that are really hard, and then there's a liability issue. So I think that that's a good thing.
Injury issue. Yeah, I mean, injury liability.
Regarding Williams Field, I was going to bring this up at the next board meeting, but I'll throw it out here. I spent a lot more time down there this summer because I had 11 and 13-year-old nephews who are soccer players, and then I went to National Night Out as well. And I am really appalled at the use of that field for as off-leash pet sort of thing. This is, Patrick told me, $375 is what we put in the replacement.
Yeah, we were north.
Yeah,
somewhere around that.
$375,000. This is an asset. And the sign somewhere along it in little type says no pets.
No, it's actually, when you walk onto the main portion of the field, there's a big sign that
Okay,
says
good.
pets with a cross through it.
Okay, well, here's the deal.
Anybody with any sense?
During National Night Out, we witnessed dogs peeing on it.
Yep.
And literally, if any dog started to do the other, I was ready to go out there and say, get that dog off that field. And I just talked with Patrick before we had this meeting today. You know, the problem with dogs out there and using it as a toilet is a real issue. And I do think we've got to figure out, do we want to put a fence? How do we want to fence it? Do we want law enforcement to start issuing what I would say are pretty hefty fines out there? Because this is an expensive asset. And then Patrick informed me somebody actually deliberately started a fire out there, and now there's some replacement that needs to go
It's
on
not
there.
the first time.
But I'm
smoke
really very appalled at Saturday. Some people were playing frisbee with their dogs out there, and so I suggest we get serious about how we try to maintain the lifespan of this, maximize the lifespan, and how we enforce it, and really have a zero tolerance for pets out there.
Well,
It's broader than that, too. It's the grassy fields where the kids play soccer, too. There's dogs running loose on that all the time.
Right.
And that's just not right.
Right.
This isn't the first time it's come before the board, so I'm glad to hear that there's more support about getting something done. But it's not uncommon before practices or before games that any of the user groups are out there picking up dog waste and
Well.
putting it in a trash can. So, one, it's unpleasant, but two,
Yeah.
God, do we really want our kids being rolling around on that grass where some, the dogs have gone to the bathroom? So this goes back to the whole, and this is a whole different conversation, I get it, but, having off-leash and all that kind of thing. I'm not opposed to off-leash, but when you let your dog run out there and just watch him go to the bathroom and leave it, that's a problem. So there has to be a bigger conversation.
Okay.
So that item right below that, we do have a small shed out in Community Park. It holds our ATV for which we groom baseball
Where
fields
is
with.
that shed?
It is all the way kind of on the other side of Stewart Field, tucked behind the
Oh.
field next to the playground. It's kind of dug in there.
Where's the optimal spot you'd be looking at?
That's actually a decent spot.
Oh, okay.
Just because our guys have to do playground stuff, west multipurpose, and the athletic surfaces to the east.
Okay.
So it's not a bad spot. It's just an old wooden building that it wouldn't really fit the ATV plus the turf groomer.
Okay.
And in all honesty, the roof is falling in on one side.
Well, would it make sense financially, and I guess from the ease of use perspective, to add on to one of the sheds that are currently at Williams Field? I mean,
Yeah.
if one of the purposes to have the turf groomer there, can you just add on to it? And
Yeah, we've previously looked at doing an attachment to the existing shed that's there now with concrete and electrical.
Yeah.
So that is a option to look at.
good.
Okay.
That number would likely increase a little bit, but we could follow up with that revised cost. Yard waste site improvements, again, another really small project, but we think it would be beneficial to maybe reconfigure the fence and expand the yard a little bit. For those of you who are down there quite a bit, you can get 2 cars facing one direction in there, and then those cars have to back out before 2 other cars pull in. And then the whole operation has to stop when the trucks come down to pull it. So we actually have to remove cars, and a lot of our customer service issues stem from trying to control traffic. This would take a portion of the yard space we give to Vargas, which isn't currently being used. We actually use it for storage of our own materials, and maybe making more of a looped system where you would pull into the existing site and then pull out on Honey Creek Lane. That way there's no conflicts. And we've got a drawing that would actually fit probably 4 vehicles in as opposed to the 2, and nobody would have to back in, back out. It's not uncommon for us to get calls saying, sorry, I backed over your fence and your fence is down and my car's damaged. So we're hoping that for a reasonable cost, we can fix that.
Put some of
Moving-
those spikes there so they can.
And really the bigger issue, as you noted, is when George is down there trying to remove, you just can't, the whole operation has to stop. There's not enough room to get the trucks in safely with residents down there.
But all the little kids that are there love to watch that. when
They
they're-
do.
That big truck,
Yeah.
loading up, but, or the
Um,
big kids too like it. So.
Moving down, continuation of kind of the North Pool cover, I think we're in some consensus on that. Below that, the school parcel improvement would be the loan repayment back for the existing park. I don't know if we want to add anything to that. And then kind of moving down into an out year project that was just referenced earlier. In 2018, the town's contribution to to improving the existing athletic surface at El Dorado K. This would be the town's portion of a new turf field.
Is
split
that
with
being
the school.
driven by BVSD, that timeline, or is it, because we've moved some projects out, that's one project I'd say move it up sooner than later, just because of the demand for field space. Now, is it possible to move that up to 2017?
No. Boulder Valley School District has said that they wouldn't be ready until at the soonest, 2018.
What's driving their time frame?
I don't know. Other priorities, I think, as far as improvements go.
I mean, are we doing it and just collecting money from them?
No, they would make the improvements, not us.
They would do the work?
They would do it and we pay
Right.
them.
Yep.
So that's a synthetic turf field?
It will
What would be
be.
our portion of it?
So we paid a total of $375 for ours. That's $250. Well, are we,
It'd be a new turf field.
but I mean, are we, is it gonna be wider and longer? So more turf,
It's a-
synthetic turf going in?
I can add just a couple of points. So
Yeah.
the initial construction itself will require regrading and installing drainage in a
Oh.
net new field, unlike what happened at Williams Field. The original field, that was, as you'll all remember, was just a weedy dirt area that had to have similar repairs done when the initial field was installed. And then on the timing, the way the flow of funds is working for the Boulder Valley School District's bond for their capital improvements district-wide,
Yeah.
the flow of funds won't make anything available for the improvements like the manager mentioned until 2018.
Okay.
There's simply the timeline under which they're committed to have the funds flow doesn't allow for them to do anything prior to 2018.
When we do that, can we take into consideration what we're talking about Williams Field and having some kind of misting or water system that will cool the synthetic turf down in the summertime and have that built in, since they're gonna be doing irrigation anyway? Not gonna be anything there. It seems like it'd be easier to include that at the time.
We can talk to them about it, yeah.
It does I think it's a safety issue too,
Mhm.
so I think it's worthwhile. Okay.
Moving down to our routine maintenance capital items.
Can I ask a question
Yep.
before we go there
Sure.
about,
Sure.
for new capital? So where, or how do you account for the improvement to Coal Creek corridor and the open space buffer? Where are those capital costs, or are those coming out of the open space funds?
Correct.
Okay, so.
Open space.
So when we get the FDP completed for Parks 1 and 2, the beginning it'll start with the Coal Creek
Mm-hmm.
corridor, and open space funds will will be used to pay for that.
Correct.
And then other funds to complete the construction of Parks 1 and 2
Mm-hmm.
will be done through the developer and the TIF.
Absolutely.
Okay. So there's no additional cost other than to complete the construction plans, which you had $200,000 for Parks 1 and 2.
Mhm.
And then we'll just be able to pull from the open space to do the Coal Creek corridor, which you are going to start with as
Correct.
soon as possible. Okay.
Correct.
But we're missing something very important here. We have not had the cost of construction on those two parks estimated. And given what we saw in El Dorado School Parcel Park when we had that estimated per the all-inclusive plan, you know, that it was sky high.
You'll see that as part, when you review the FDP. The cost
Okay.
estimates will be in there.
Because,
As part of the subdivision improvements agreement.
yeah, okay. Well,
It'll also break out separate the Coal Creek improvement costs from the park costs.
And then who's the subdevelopment improvement agreement? Who's signing that? Whose is that? Is that
It's
with
between the town and RC Superior.
Okay, that's what I was hoping you were going to say, because we've been creating the FDP, and now we're going to work to create with them, with RC Superior, the construction documents, but the subdivision improvement agreement will be with RC Superior. Okay, thank you.
And then we will see when we get over to landscape fee, you'll start to see where we factored in costs for maintaining those facilities. It's just kind of a follow-up. Back to maintenance capital, we have some items that are fairly routine for us. Park furniture replacement. This is everything from trash cans to benches to picnic tables that end up being damaged. You see this number kind of go down over time. We've been spending a lot on benches, getting rid of the old wooden benches. Below that, line 82 is the request for a vehicle. This would be a net new vehicle for us. Currently, we have 2 of our park staff share 1 vehicle. So we've limited ourselves a little bit. They have to do a little bit of carpooling around town. And as our responsibilities for snow removal have increased, we've got 1 staff person who is basically saddled up with another one. So this would allow that individual to have their own work vehicle.
What are you going to get for that kind of money?
This is the, yeah, we'll stick with the Colorado. Our vehicles are split between 2 lines.
Okay.
So this would be general fund's portion of that Colorado.
Okay.
And we use the Colorados to plow paths and just our regular maintenance around town. You'll see the guys moving around in their trucks. The line below that is a dedicated $15,000 for the shrub bed renovations. This is a project we've been slowly working on. It's getting rid of a lot of the junipers that have died out over time and replacing it with more current plant material. A couple lines just off in 2018, nothing major, some tennis court improvements. This is something we budget for frequently. And then we're getting to the point in 2018 where we need to start looking at the quality of our parking lots. And that's...
Patrick, I know ProStack over the past few years, or a couple of years, I'm not sure time frame, has been surveying the playground equipment around town. And is there going to be equipment replacement coming up? And if so, how's that funded?
When we transition over to CTF, we are proposing some changes with CTF as some other capital and general fund needs have come up. But for this year, we're looking at doing an embankment slide behind one of the existing parks. And that project's already underway. There's been about $35,000 a year budgeted for those type of improvements. But as I said, once we get kind of over here to CTF, we do have some changes to that because we're starting to get some needs that CTF can help cover. So. Yep.
So can I take us back to 73 on the other page? I wanted to bring this to people's attention who maybe don't pay as much attention as I do to Colton Road. Along Colton Road, particularly on the south side, and it's east of Calmonte, et cetera, there's a portion of that right-of-way that has never been irrigated. And so obviously by this time of year, it looks really pathetic. And I had raised this issue with Matt several years back. I actually was surprised to see that it's put out to 2021 in the budget.
You're talking about the tree line area, right? Between the sidewalk and the street? Yeah.
And I actually would love to see that moved up. I would like people to take notice of it when they're there. It's obviously was overlooked somehow. I don't know that we know how it was overlooked. But it really is, it's significant. It's interior of town, and it is weeds and dead grass most of the summer.
Where is it? East of Indiana or west of Indiana?
East of Indiana?
What I'm talking is west of Indiana, around
Along Calmonte, along the firehouse, going west?
At Indiana and Colton. To the west, towards the roundabout, there is.
Well, it wasn't completed, the development. I think that's why it never got.
Around the detention pond, et cetera. That's where I'm. Is that? Are we?
So this project line, I think, includes enhancements to the medians as well, right?
Correct.
Yeah. to put irrigation in that tree lawn would be roughly what? Just off the top of your head?
Just the irrigation alone,
Just in that tree lawn?
20, 30.
Yeah. we're
Yeah, I'd
at
really
20
like to see that
30,000.
moved up. I mean, this is, you know, a part of town that's just been totally overlooked. And likewise, if you go north in Indiana, south on Indiana towards El Dorado K8, south of the intersection with the first Torrey's Peak, along the school right away, that part's totally unirrigated as well. Across the street, it's irrigated. Again, I think I was assured by you, Matt, that's going to be irrigated as part of the school project, the school park project. So I'm happy to hear that, but it really is just part of town that weirdly was overlooked. So I'd like it to be brought into compliance with the rest of the town in terms of that right away along the streets there.
Does the Calmonte construction impact any of that?
No, their improvements are south of there. And there's a low water crossing across the creek that they'll do and connect to the existing sidewalk, and that's it.
And that corner there is, that corner of Indiana and McCaslin, I'm sorry, Colton and McCaslin on the south side, the southeast side of Colton and McCaslin, that's where don't we have some parkland there? I mean, isn't that some of the town's land there where the water comes through there and where you talk about the little water crossing?
You are correct, and as part of the Calmonte project, that trail, they'll construct the trail to come down along McCaslin and wrap through there. That's a kind of floodway
Right, and then I think that,
for Rock Creek.
yeah, I think if I remember right, there's been some discussion about how to improve that corner there, parkland or for trails and things like that, because we own it, the town, right? It's not, it's part of our, so that was never done because the development didn't complete. Now, I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, all of that along
Right.
there, all along it from west from Indiana on Colton, they all probably should be looked at. I'm
So
not sure
is-
what needs to be done.
Is there support then to move this project up?
The whole project or the $20,000 for
Either,
irrigation?
we could do the irrigation piece separate, add 20, I'd say 30,000 in
So-
17, or we could move the entire project up.
What's the other 160 going to do?
So the 190,000, just so we're talking same location, most of those improvements reflected in that number are east of Indiana down to Rock Creek Circle. Nothing really contemplated, and the medians, nothing really contemplated from Indiana west towards Colton, because there it is a floodway. There's an urban drainage pond in there that was not contemplated as part of that 190,000.
So what are the deficits in the median that you're seeing between Colton and Rock Creek Parkway? Indiana Rock Creek Parkway.
It's just that unirrigated native sod that we were looking to make upgrades to, upgrade the whole irrigation system and improve plant material. So it would move from a more native look to a more manicured look like you would see.
In the median or on the?
On the south side, and then in the internal median,
Okay.
we would bring those up to what we consider kind of our new standard, which is flower material, modern grasses, and better irrigation.
But at least right now, the grass parts of that area are green with grass. If you go west of Indiana, it's all burned out, nothing. You guys keep it mowed short,
Right.
but it's
I would say. I guess my recommendation would be, we just add a budget, if the board supports it, into this 2017 budget to add irrigation to that area, and then we can
do the rest
discuss
as-
the other project
yeah.
later.
I'm happy
future.
with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right.
And
Yeah.
can you work it into your schedule to figure out a whole new project? in 2017 for that area, or does it have to be out in 2018? I mean,
No, we'll be able to do that in 2017.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, great.
So in that particular case, we'll highlight that, we'll chat with Patrick and get some sort of placeholder. We'll get some sort of placeholder there for the next time you see the budget.
Okay.
So now we're down to line 94, other capital, which is generally, typically admin or finance type of activities. So Martin or Matt, you want to run through a couple of those?
So environmental enhancements. This is just ongoing budget item that we have. Upgrade lighting to LED where it's available to do. Any building enhancements to any of the buildings we have as far as HVAC that will help cut down cost for energy. And then upgrade some of our electric vehicle charging stations. Some of them aren't working, need to be upgraded. They have the new standard, which is a faster charging station. So we're looking at maybe doing a couple of those as well. Wayfinding signage. This is just to help people navigate our trails, where to go. We got the new underpass, so we're going to add signage there so people know how to get to it and where it goes. And then for the bikeway, we're adding signage in other areas through town.
What will they say? Just Coal Creek this way? And
Alex, do you, or where'd Patrick go? Yeah.
will there be any historical information on them, or is it purely
There's several. We started on this last year, and we've part of it came from the first and final mile study around the station, how to get people in and out. And then we thought, well, let's expand this because we're going to have the BRT station, we're going to have the town center, so we want to direct people along the trails to get back and forth, and then further migrate. So this will be for installation of the signs, but we'll be coming back. We've already had discussion with the Planning Commission about what the sign should look like, and probably, the pros committee will probably talk about what things should be signed, what locations should be signed, and then the Planning Commission will talk about the types of signs and where they would go.
Are you going to include the Historical Commission too? I think the Historical
we
Commission
could,
should be
yeah.
involved in that.
So we have some prototypes, but we haven't gone very far because we've had other things that we've been worried about.
Okay.
But we wanted to put some money. We are working on a grant with 36 Community Solutions to do the area around the BRT station. Once we get that in place and get the signs designed, and at that time we'll go through the various committees about what the system should be, and get back to you with recommendations.
Are there any standards that the 36?
Yes, the first and final mile study did a whole lot on these graphics, looking at the whole corridor, but it allowed for kind of the general framework, and then each community could put their logo or whatever. So we have some standards to go by. We just have to figure out how we want to tell them to Superior.
Matt, the tennis courts, have they been replaced with LEDs, or is that part of this effort?
They have, yeah. Yep.
They've been done. Okay, thanks.
The vehicle replacement, it's replaced the fleet vehicle. It was supposed to be, it was scheduled to be replaced this year, but we thought we could get another year out of it, so we pushed that out to 2017. Monument sign, so I don't know if anybody's noticed. I did this on purpose, I guess, but we had the electronic sign here go dark back in the spring, and we had the company come out, and they gave us a $10,000 to $20,000 number to fix it or replace it, basically. And what I instructed staff to do was just to put money in the budget for next year and see if we got any complaints from anybody or questions about why the sign wasn't working, because I wanted to see if people actually used it. And I think we got.
So you did your own study?
Yes, I did my own study. We received 0 calls or emails about why the sign wasn't working. Which I guess my recommendation to the board is we take it out. Maybe we could lower the sign and just have it say Town Hall with some nice stone columns. But it's up to the board. We can replace it if you'd like, but that, I guess that's our recommendation.
It's
I
kind of
am
grown on
gritting
me.
my teeth because this was a bad idea from the beginning and an expensive problem, because they were never.
Well,
You're
They're-
talking about
I
in
mean,
2010 when it was it 2010?
When it was
put in?
installed, yeah, because it was expensive and they're notoriously bad for maintenance, for keeping
we were
running.
trying to enhance communication to
I
residents.
That's what it was all
And,
about.
Yeah.
This was an idea that,
I like it at night when I leave the
It's
town
grown on
hall
me.
in
I
the
mean,
dark, but that's the only time.
When it's lit up, I honestly didn't recognize it. Wow. I do look at it and oh yeah, there's a meeting
But we
coming up.
see it, I see it when I leave town hall at 10:30 after a town meeting, or 11
Right.
o'clock at night, then you see it, and it's kind of comforting to know that it's flashing and, with something that the next time I have to come up here at night
We've had
is,
too
a
much,
week away.
we've had too much road work to take your eyes off the road and read signs.
Right.
yeah, that's true too.
I've been accustomed to looking at streetlights that are out now. That's all I that's
Yeah,
all I'm
right.
trained on. So,
Everybody's
but
focused on something different. That's
Exactly.
true.
but
So-
I've not noticed it either, and I think let's leave it.
I don't think it's worth $25,000 to fix it.
Plant some flowers.
I mean, the
Adam, we haven't
communication
missed it.
value
Right.
is not worth $25,000 to fix it.
Right.
So you're going to remove the electronics completely?
Well,
Something?
we'll take a look and see what's the most economical.
Let's just
thing
get a
to do
big
with it.
screen TV from Costco. We can replay the town meetings out there.
All right, yeah, we
How
can
about
do that, yeah.
Now, that's an idea.
They have
But
some-
what about the lighted signs? I mean, since we have electricity and everything there, they do have, like, the monument signs along 36 that drive you into the marketplace. Or into Superior, Safeway. Is there any value, and I don't know, this
Right.
is right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Value of being able to put something, like you put, and then light up behind it, something in that
A
box.
backlit sign.
Yeah, backlit sign of some, I don't know what, I don't know, since we already have it, instead of tearing it out, I don't know.
So.
Take a look at it.
We can leave this number in there. Staff will look at what's the best options, provide you with some information next year, and then we can decide where we want to go at that
I'm
point.
going to take the counter position here. One, I hate the red. I don't know how red was ever decided upon when our colors are burgundy, and maybe burgundy was not in the palette. So if we keep it, I would like to see the red painted burgundy, but that's a little, whatever. But it does provide utility, and it does provide a nice, quick way to say, committee volunteers needed and whatnot. And these repeat impressions matter. Or Chili Fest this weekend, or a town board meeting tonight.
Parade, Skate with Santa.
Yeah, Skate with Santa. It shows a vibrancy in the community, that there are things happening, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one just because people didn't call in saying we really miss it. I still think it has impact and usefulness. I would have to weigh, is it worth $25,000 to spend on? And, again, to keep our name out there, how much are we spending on the Morgul next year?
15.
Okay. So, and that's all about impressions that probably are less useful than these messages that come via this sign. So I'd like to keep it in here. Let's think about a little bit more.
Yeah, let's leave it in, and new board can take that up. So,
Sounds good.
Good points.
Public art, this is for a art project somewhere in town next year, whether it's the new roundabout or somewhere in the town center or some other location that's recommended.
But that's just an additional fund, because we have $1 million in TIF that's for public art, too.
Right, that pay through the
Yeah,
bonds.
Yeah, so this is what the town would spend, but there is the possibility over the next few years of using $1 million of the
Correct.
TIF.
Yep.
Okay.
So Matt, this $250,000 spent on public art over that time frame, is it the committee that decides where it's going to go, or is that something?
They'll make a recommendation to the board, and then the board would decide.
Just as an update, there was an attempt to have a public art working group meeting last week, and 2 trustees showed up for it, and we were the only people that showed up because the meeting had been canceled. But
So what did you decide?
Well, we couldn't get in the building.
$250,000.
We couldn't get in the building, so we said, what the hell? We're going to spend
So we called
lots of money.
Matt on his way home saying, are we in the wrong place? Anyway, I heard from a committee member that the committee members had only been notified 2 days prior about this meeting. Whether or
No,
not
that's not correct.
Yeah, whether or not it's correct, I don't know, but that was her take on things. But anyway, I go back to whenever we had this conversation about this previously. I think with some trustee support, we can energize this and refocus it and make it more productive than it's been in the past, and probably less frustrating for the residents who are volunteering. And so I think this, again, this is a placeholder. Whether or not, what happens is still very iffy.
Why wouldn't we make this public art committee an actual committee like the other advisory committees? Because they've got some discretion over a significant budget. So why wouldn't we make that an official group to assign them the first Tuesday of every month that they're going to meet in here, so that there isn't that confusion, give them direction on what their annual work plan should be, and then they report back to the board, so everybody's in sync.
It sounds like that's what the majority is.
Yeah,
Well,
we can interview the members.
I think we need to have, as a board, if we could,
could add it as
schedule
a
it
retreat.
at a little, retreat, because it's been defined thus far as public art. I'd personally like to see it public art and culture, so that it can be events and, go beyond just art installations or, statues and all that kind of stuff.
You can go after some of that grant money from the public arts, cultural district money.
Right. Well,
Let's add that to a retreat topic, because
Okay.
I think there's some
But I
additional
think-
discussion to have on that.
yeah.
Okay.
Fiber optics, staff's been investigating connecting the town facilities. Town Hall has our main server and a lot of our software, but we have irrigation systems out there. We have school flashes. We have traffic control systems. We have our water and sewer plants that have various software and data connections. We have cameras out around town. So we're investigating how do we connect all these facilities, and we've been looking at the fiber that's already in the ground. Zayo, for example, has a fiber backbone. So we're putting together a plan, and you see 2 placeholders here for initial work in connecting those facilities. Some may be to start with the interchange, connecting the interchange to Town Hall, so some of the money would come there. Our facilities out there, if that stays, we need a better connection, and the next priority would go to the water treatment plant that already has radio connections for a lot of irrigation, school flashes, and all that goes to the water treatment plant, and then so it'd be nice to have a hardwire connection between that and Town Hall. So we're investigating that. We want to use things that are in the ground rather than doing it ourselves. So that's where we're going with this.
So this would be connections to existing fiber? That's what this estimate is for? What you just said?
With Zayo, you would have to buy or lease
Right, you'd have to
their
buy or
lines, and
lease
then
a
you have to
light
get
from them.
connections to their lines.
Right. So Zayo, which they were just in the paper a week or so ago about having some difficulty, and then with some of their other projects. And then what about on McCaslin here, does CenturyLink have any fiber that we could
CenturyLink,
use?
Comcast, they all.
And
they all have
Comcast?
fiber,
I think we
yes.
should also talk to them, because I think we need to see how they can, especially Comcast, even though fiber doesn't have anything to do with their cable franchise that they have, but I mean, their franchise they have with us, yeah. But I just, these are the kind of things that those big corporations would want to work with the towns to help connect to their fiber, if they have it running up McCaslin or not. I think we should have a real heavy conversation with them, how they're going to work with us, how they'd be willing to work with us. And we might not have to spend that money, or all of it.
How is that laid? Is there, do we have to put new fiber in? Is that what we're saying we're going to do? Or is, I don't understand how it works.
Okay, well, Fazeo already has they already have backbone. They have the pipes out there.
Okay.
So this would be to have a long-term, or maybe buy some of their strands in their existing fiber, and then connecting to it. We have to have some way to connect to their fiber.
Okay, so there's already fiber optics throughout town?
Right.
Even Rock Creek and...
There would be on the main, think about the main streets, I know Comcast a few years ago laid it down Rock Creek Parkway. They laid a bunch of broadband or fiber down Rock Creek Parkway. I don't know for sure where it is exactly, but I know they were out there doing that probably 5 years ago or 6 years ago.
So,
and CenturyLink,
So Zayo approached us because they had the background, why don't you take advantage of it? But we could go out to Comcast and CenturyLink.
I think we should. If Zayo wants us, then we get a little competition going on. Who really wants the town to connect to their fiber?
What about the Boulder Valley School District fiber?
Yes.
Zayo put the Boulder Valley School District's lines in.
But they were looking to partner with communities, weren't they, to
Well,
have communities use their fiber optics?
Well, sure, because, fiber is high capacity.
Right.
And the small usage that comes from Boulder Valley School District, so of course they want somebody to come and help pay for that.
So we would be exploring all this.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to connect to their system, so this is some of the cost to connect them and then to lease or buy some of their lines.
Right.
So then, following Alex's theme of placeholders, we still have the placeholder here for the town hall expansion construction. And obviously, as Trustee Pennington had mentioned, the next step of that particular project is the community meeting or the open house tonight. So we just have rebudgeted those construction funds into 2017. And then the final item is our standard server replacements. I don't know which server this one is. This is our Laserfish server, so we replace those typically on a 5-year basis. So that takes us then through the governmental capital fund.
Okay. Maybe a good time for a 5-minute break? Okay.
Who's in our room? Our food's in there. Yeah. Well, that's important. Is that important?
Hi, I'm Ronald Spangler.
Hi, read it
Send all
yourself.
of your emails.
Yes.
How you doing?
I got it
Chris,
yesterday. We were in the business meeting.
Did you receive my email reply back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I absolutely got mine back at me.
Huh.
I think some fishy guy. But
Yeah, I actually have problems getting emails for some reason, but I got yours, so yeah.
I got yours, but
Have some breakfast
we were
or
in this
coffee?
meeting, so I had that time.
yeah, hopefully we get together. I want to hear.
Well, this is a good way to learn. Sit here and listen to
I can say about maybe tomorrow morning because my email back.
Tomorrow is Thursday morning, so I have carpool duty over to Monarch K8. So I drop off at 8:15, so 8:30 if you want.
I could do like 9:15.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah. Where do you want to go?
Starbucks?
Sure. Over and up in by Flatirons Landover. Yeah. Sure. Okay.
What did we say? 9:15.
9:15. Either one.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
This making any sense to you so far?
Yeah?
walking into the middle of it.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense, and like,
The guy Paul,
depth of knowledge.
yeah.
so he's bringing it in.
This guy Paul Niles, our finance manager, is really, really, really a star. He's good,
Yeah.
really good. He makes this all palatable. I always glass over when I think, oh shit, budget. Looks like we're adding another meeting next Wednesday from 9 to 12. I think that's the way it's shaping up.
Yeah, I was looking at, I was catching on with the different components, and it makes a lot of sense. Still broken down. It's funny because, so many groups I work with have no concept, what's what, and then you find a few people that did this,
Yeah,
they have the frame of reference.
we go out 5 years and we try to maintain a 75% reserve fund for the bad years. So I think we've been really a fiscally responsible town. You missed some interesting discussion yesterday to start out with of how we've reduced our property tax in town consistently, which is a minor piece of your whole property tax bill. The big chunks are county, school, fire district. Ours is, but we've reduced our property tax every year, and we reduced our debt service considerably since.
How'd you do that? I
Just
thought you had new bonds.
yeah, we did. We were working on some new bonds, but old debt, we've been paying it off and accelerating payment or reducing, refinancing at lower rates. And again, Paul's just, he's a miracle worker, really. I'm so impressed with that guy.
Remember when Coors Field got paid off, like,
You would be wise if you could schedule some time with him
yeah?
to walk you through. Yeah. Paul is the guy with the tangent. Oh, Matt is sitting right there on the right-hand side. Matt Magley.
I sent him that too.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And some time with him. This is Mayor Clint.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he got back to me on email.
he's amazing. He will find time for everybody and everything, which I don't know how he does it. He's
Also,
in,
he was the crossing guard at the elementary yesterday.
yeah, he does that as regular. He's got two young kids, so 2 boys, and he's been doing crossing guards.
Yeah.
So we met some good people.
Next Wednesday, 9 to 9. Is what you said is the next meeting?
Next Wednesday morning would be the next finance meeting. We have the meeting tonight, the open house from 6 to 7:30 about the town hall expansion, which is kind of a hot topic.
Yeah.
That's going to be a hot topic in the election too. Sandy, did you meet Rob?
I'm Rob.
You might recognize him from.
Yeah, we met over at the coffee.
He's part of my.
Well, I had you wrong, though.
There's a spangler on the.
I
fire
haven't made
district.
it all through
I
my
wanted to
emails,
warn
but
you.
I'm happy to meet with you, and I'm having First Fridays, I'm taking over Deb's First Fridays, 7:30 at Starbucks
Oh, this
on
Friday
Friday.
night?
There we
Yeah,
go.
it's, the announcement has yet to go out because I've been so busy with family in town and all that kind of stuff. So everybody's invited, all trustees too. I want it to be a
You
whole
noticed it, right?
opportunity to sit down. So you're welcome to come to that, and I'm happy to meet with you separately. But see, I had you confused. I thought you were the Rocky Mountain Fire
Yeah,
Spangler.
I meant to warn you, there's a spangler in town that's on the Rocky Mountain Fire District.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's who I thought you were,
Oh, yeah.
but you aren't.
No.
Okay, well, there you go.
He's not taking a bunch of our taxes like the other guy.
Right. Well, I was hoping he was going to run and then see it from our perspective that this is a little overdone, because that mill levy that community approved for the fire district is pretty substantial,
Yeah.
And when we all have to pay it, we're going to
Well, when we pay
Say
it on
out.
top of the increased assessments that we're gonna get, as we know we're gonna get coming up this next time around, it's gonna be more painful.
Well, nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you too.
I gotta-
Clint,
I
I'm
gotta
Rob.
take-
Yeah, you dropped me my email.
Yep.
Thank you. Before I'll get back with you and see if we can find the time.
Sounds good.
All right, take care.
Appreciate you coming.
Ooh, he's got the good ones there.
Now I'm really confused. What is Mr. Spangler's name for, is it Bob too, for Rocky Mountain Fire?
Mark.
Mark Spangler.
Mark
yeah.
Spangler.
Okay.
Any relation?
No. But every time I go buying shoes, you gotta put in your last name. He and I always come up together.
Yeah. Well, I can't say that it's a common last name and to have
It's
two
like all the
Spanglers.
Penningtons at Superior Liquor that come up.
Is there a lot?
Yeah, all my family.
There's a Pennington in the rugby club.
Mm.
And then I had to ask, are you related to Sandy?
My name's Robert Spangler. Yeah, it's up to you. Yeah, I'm a trustee.
We just had that conversation.
Yeah,
No.
I got Sandy
Yeah.
down.
I just wondered, yeah, me too.
Little, like, mini satellites, for balloons. They're actually working on about putting balloons, mini balloons in the sky and using them to provide internet connections.
Okay.
So instead of, because the first and last mile, just like transportation, first and last mile is a problem, so is the first and last mile for fiber.
Yeah,
There might be fiber down here, but how do you get it to the home?
yeah.
So Google is actually working on putting these little balloons in the air, and, kind of low Earth, but,
Mhm.
really lower than low Earth satellites. And they've trialed them now in many places, and Google wants to become the new,
Okay, are we ready to get started again?
wireless. I mean, everything.
So the next budget we have is something called Conservation Trust Fund. I call it lottery money. So we've got a couple of projects in there that Patrick will go through.
As Paul mentioned, this money is the money the town collects from the lottery. We are looking at doing something a little bit different this year. You'll see that we've got our allocation split between two lines, pool repair and improvements. This used to be in general fund kind of capital. These are anything that pops up during the summer, pumps breaking, water lines breaking, allows us to kind of keep the pools running. There are years that we blow through this, and there are years where we don't quite reach the 60, but 60 is about what it takes, and that number's a little bit lower this year because of the North Pool. You'll see that it jumps up a little bit higher in 2018 and beyond as we're looking to make some repairs to the South Pool, which is now starting to see some issues. And then the line below that is tree, plant, and shrub bed enhancements. Again, this is an item that had been covered under general fund capital. This is just us replacing all the dying trees, the emerald ash borer trees, plant material that an open space that dies. So pretty important projects for us. We haven't typically had them in CTF, so it is a bit of a change. And Joe, to your point earlier on the parks projects, in 2016 and a couple years before that, we were doing the park playground enhancements out of this line with that $35,000. And something that we've noticed pretty quick is that the 35 actually doesn't get us very far. And if we do want to look at some of those big picture playground enhancements, which ProStack's been doing a great job on, we may need to look at coming up with a bigger number. A great example was us trying to put in shade structures last year. We ended up doing 3 smaller shade structures, which was great, but the original project started as a way to try to cover an entire playground. And I mean, that project would have been, a $100,000 project. So just some minor changes to address some needs that we have without taxing some of our other projects. We're getting to that point where we've got a lot of things we need to maintain and need to budget for them accordingly.
As I recall, his CTF budget, the policy used to be that I think we've moved away from, that was basically the Parks and Recreation budget. Mm-hmm. And so they were limited to doing whatever they were doing park-wise to this budget period.
Mm-hmm.
I just, as an aside, glad to say that we've changed that policy and put them on an equal footing with competing for budget money and going back over time.
Yeah, the pools and the plant material are really big ticket items for pros, and the plant material, as you can see driving around town, we're going to be spending money to get a lot of the dead material out and new material in. It's 20 years old and it's starting to show. So.
Hey, Patrick, just a difference in my binder. The 2017 budget for tree, shrub, and plant enhancements is 135. That says 60. Did I miss something here?
That I'll have to go back and check. That actually might be. Oh, that's right.
It's split with
landscape fee. Sorry, Jeff just reminded me the total number split with landscape fee fund.
So it's elsewhere in the.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
You'll see another 75 in landscape fee fund.
Okay.
You may want to stay up there, Patrick. But now to open space. Similar on the revenue side, this is similar to our governmental capital fund, where we have a dedicated 0.3% sales and use tax that generates, starting to get close to $1 million a year for open space. So that's the primary revenue source here.
Yep, kind of just going down the line. You'll see some things that are fairly routine. Our contribution to Boulder County Youth Corps, that allows us to bring in the team of Youth Corps in the summer, which has been great for us. The open space coordination for the outdoor education. This is currently the contract with Ashley DeLopp. If you remember earlier this year, OSAC requested a little bit more money to really kind of take National Trails Day to that next level in terms of an event. We had some parking issues this year. It's been a really successful event, so starting to dedicate a little bit more towards that. Right below that, you see a fairly large number, 800. Again, kind of going back to this year, this was what we were calling the Expedited Trails program, with the 6 trails that we're currently in design and engineering. This allows us to construct a part of those trails. We also have some money still to go this year. We're really optimistic that a couple of those smaller trail connections are going to get done this year. We're really close to putting 2 of the trails out for bid. Another really kind of big ticket item, line 30, Coal Creek enhancements. As we've talked with Parks 1 and 2, this is our thought on what it's probably going to take to get the creek corridor where we want it, with the proposed design from Matrix that you guys will see come forward.
So what involvement should that have from OSAC? They've seen the plans, but they've not seen an estimate for the cost.
Correct.
And that would come out of the Open Space Fund, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's got to be some involvement.
Yeah, so once the FDP is approved, if it gets approved, then, we would put a scope together for the work for the Coal Creek improvements, and those would go back to the Open Space Committee with the number, a construction cost, get their input and advice on that, and then it would come back to the board as a construction contract.
Okay.
But the line 28, the trail improvements and other projects, that also goes to ProStack, right?
Both of those items were before the committees this year, and they came up with the joint recommendation
Yeah.
to come forward. And if I remember, ProStack kind of followed along with OSAC's language, was to pay for the trails out of this line.
Right. They prioritized them jointly.
Right.
Just a note there, ProStack's been working sort of with a figure of about 650, so this is the first time we're seeing 8. So, we'll want to, on the next budget, the next meeting, just inform them that this has been factored in here at 800, just as a,
Right, sure.
keep them in the loop.
Sure. Moving down line 31, this item's been in the budget for a while. This is to take down the building that's on the Shan Shan property. And then right below that, beginning the planning process to look at a trailhead. I think that's gained some traction with both committees. And we floated the idea by Boulder County, and that had some traction.
When you talk about a trailhead, is that going to include parking then? Or?
It's something I think in this 10,000 that we'll look at. We, as you guys know, we have some issues down at the 3rd Avenue trailhead, especially when cars are parked on both sides. We can't get emergency equipment down in there. It's a popular trail. So this 10 here would allow us to study what a trailhead with parking would look like, including getting in and out of McCaslin. But the stars are starting to kind of align on this one in terms of the county's interest and the town's interest.
So that, we had a 2-year, was it a 2-year agreement that we had to leave that there?
It was 3.
So it's
It
been
was-
3, it'll be 3
It's been
years?
3 years, yeah.
And is there anything in it right now?
Yeah, they're still storing, I think, some of the equipment and stuff from their restaurants, and then I think there's just household type furniture or office furniture in there as well.
So when do you anticipate that demolition to happen? Like January 1 or the middle of summer?
No, there's a specific date that Martin and I have in our calendar.
Okay, yeah.
Thanks.
All right. So we'll notify the previous owners that they have until this date to get their
Wow.
items out of the structure, and yeah.
That's, what a change that's going to be.
Yeah.
And then we regrade it and slope that hill to look natural and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we'll do some minor things like that, and then once we have a plan, then we can do more of the significant type of improvements to the area.
Wow.
Patrick, I have a question about, you've got the buffer irrigation system in there. Is the trails and the landscaping of that in that 800,000 then? Or where is the trails and the landscaping?
So we're hoping to kind of have that number once we get through the design phase.
Okay,
It's-
you haven't put it in yet.
We don't
Okay.
have that number yet.
Okay, thank you.
But that will be an open space expense. The 300 you see here will get us design and irrigation, and hopefully part of the irrigation system going in sooner rather than later.
What part of the buffer are we planning to irrigate?
I think that's
Just,
related to
just,
design.
that's along, but the concept idea is along the trail, to have some tree, put a trail in, and then along the trail have some trees. So the irrigation would be primarily to keep the grasses or
Alive.
trees that are lining the trail irrigated, not to irrigate like green lawn
No.
at all.
It's
The
supposed to be a
whole,
natural
That
open
Yeah.
space.
weed, or that seed mix, sorry, that seed mix that we put down in that area requires a little bit of irrigation.
right,
to
so there'll
keep
be
it
some
looking-
just to get it
Yeah.
back to something that looks more like natural. But along the trail itself, there's a trail going to go along, which would be most likely along the north
Northern.
edge of the buffer, all
Yep.
the way from McCaslin to
To the other
36. And then that trail and then there'll be trees and shrubs and, or whatever gets designed in there. But trees for sure along that trail.
And we pay for this irrigation system, the town.
Mm-hmm. I'm gritting my teeth again.
When you,
Wait,
We agreed to pay for it, you know.
when we're on the bikeway going by the by the bike bridge over 36, right now, looks like there's an indication of a continuing trail going down into, towards Coal Creek, really, Coal Creek Road. Yeah, towards the Anderson property. Is that anywhere near consideration of design? Or are we waiting for Anderson property development before we?
Yeah, we'll need to wait for Anderson property development.
But that's a great point. I rode that the other day, and that would be a nice connection to, into our
Superior.
town, yeah.
Into Rock Creek.
Paul, on the open space fund, what's the balance? What do we currently have in that fund? Again, I'm sorry.
So Jeff, roll down, go to that line, what is that, line 43, Jeff, that we look at? So it looks like low point next year will be about $2 million, and that'll jump up to, 5 to 6 million by the end of the 5-year period.
That's because you're paying back the money you took out, right?
So we are showing next year, and roll up, please, Jeff, now, in the revenue side on line 16, yes, there's the loan payback.
So we got 5 million basically available, but 2 million was used, or 3, to pay for the El Dorado.
Right, but we're going to use another 800,000, so it's going to take that balance down to.
Right, and that, obviously, the $1.5 million here. So low
Right.
point will be a couple $1 million, quickly, relatively quickly replenished.
So what do we do if a key piece, a targeted open space area comes available? And I got to imagine it's going to be more than that. How do we handle that?
We would have a chat. Maybe we would do something we did to accelerate El Dorado K-8. Maybe we could do an interfund loan. I mean, we've got some options. Remember, we have the 75% reserve requirement sitting in the general fund as well as in the utility operations. So, the board could decide to do, and precedent has been set to do an internal loan, or we could look at a more formalized
So if something comes
loan.
available at $6 million, we can.
We would have some the board would have some flexibility, yes, to do so.
It's not what?
It wouldn't be an obstacle to us pursuing an opportunity if the board wanted to.
Okay. And then the other question about the buffer irrigation, the town agreed to pay for that now, even though we don't receive ownership of that until 2 years or 3 years from now? Okay.
Yes, but we're going to get ownership of that lot sooner than 2 to 3 years. As soon as,
It's whenever the board decides.
whenever the board decides, which it
gotta
could
be
be right away,
It's got to
that-
be warranted, though.
Well, warranty what? See, that's the thing, that the
Slope.
developer
Yeah.
isn't, well, the
Sloughing
slope,
and,
the slope. But that was the town basically agreed with the developer that the developer's going to hand us over that 225 feet of buffer, and we can do whatever we want with it. And so now we're, as a town, then are responsible for coming up with the design for that open space and funding whatever we do to it. When originally it was supposed to be part of the development and also landscaped per the development, PD
Okay.
plan.
Okay.
But now it's morphed beyond that, and we've accepted it as part of this kind of a running around the tree many times about what the buffer constitutes. But,
Okay.
I don't think that was, well, anyway, that's where we're at. We can't go backwards. We can only go forwards. And what we have right now is that we, as a town, agreed, we'll take that buffer and we'll be responsible for landscaping it, putting the trail in. And in order to put a trail in with some trees, you have to have irrigation there.
Okay.
So can I have verification Is Rita totally correct in that statement?
We can go back and get you the information that was.
Well, I agree with her.
Yeah.
Her depiction, but I want to make sure it's properly, all the detail is correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
And this is totally immaterial, Jeff, if you roll up to where we have the yellow. Again, yellow represents any changes. So you'll see in a couple budgets, the water line, we had budgeted at those 5% increases, and we've modified those to reflect that those water rate increases, are going down and obviously are benefiting all users of the system, residents, businesses, as well as the town. We're a pretty big water user of Alex's and Jim's utility there, so that's what that represents. So if there are no other questions on open space, we'll go to open space debt. Again, pretty straightforward. What we have here is Jeff and I unfortunately used a preliminary debt service schedule for the principal and interest. That was in your initial budget, so we revised this. This number actually went down a little bit, so this just is the revised accurate debt service schedule through 2026 for the refundable open space bonds. Landscape fee, Patrick, you'll be up again, but on the revenue side here, line 10 represents kind of the base landscape fees, and again, this is $30 for a home a month, $25 for a townhome, $20 for an apartment, and develop Flatirons there. Then additionally, what we have represented there on lines 11 and 12, just to give you a sense, is the new revenue generated by the new development in town paying into that particular landscape fee. And then we have a policy discussion tentatively scheduled for the 12th of September meeting to talk about maybe, extending that to the two areas in town that are not paying, Original Town and Remington at this point in time. And on the expenditure side, the yellow there obviously is the water discussion that I just had, and then Patrick will let you kind of go through some other big points here.
Not a lot of significant changes to this line, fairly standard to previous years. Would just like to call out that you'll start to see budget numbers factored in for STC Parks 1 and 2, and then the park next to El Dorado K School. And you'll see that on the water side as well as the landscape maintenance side. So, and you'll see the additional $72,000 kick in next year. That'll be included in when we go out to bid for landscape services this year. We're obviously expanding the scope of that contract to cover the new park, and we've gotten some cost from our current vendor as well as some others that put us in that cost range, the $72,000 for the upkeep on the park. Other than that, the line 37, as we were a couple slides back, that's the remainder of the tree and plant replacement. And then Joe, going all the way back to that very first comment about the vehicles, you'll see line 40. That's where the bulk of that new vehicle for pros, that number lies.
But the STC Parks 1 and 2 will be in long before 2020.
Yep, we've discussed that before, and we're aware that the date's out there.
Well, and the logic there being that that will be installed by not us, but by a third party.
Oh, I see, and then we won't take it over.
We have a 2-year warranty,
Okay.
and then our assumption would,
Okay,
or
that
we
makes
would
sense.
assume at that point in time, which is different than Eldo KA, which is essentially our park from day one. So that's a good point, Trustee Dozel. And Jeff, if you could roll down to the bottom, I just want to alert the board to this. We, over the last couple of years, on line 45, looks at revenues versus expenses, and we're planning to deficit spend in this account over the next number of years. We have the cash reserves to do it. We're actually above the board's reserve requirements in this particular fund. This fund's a little bit different. We've identified that we want to keep cash to cover expenses to the order of magnitude of 10 to 25% of annual expenses. So we're above that particular amount, but we are deficit spending and getting that fund balance down, still above or at the very end in 2021 within the board's reserve requirement. But, just we're consciously doing that, but that trend obviously can't continue for the next 10 years or so, but it's something we'll need to evaluate and adjust as necessary.
Yeah, Paul, that was one of my questions about this, the deficit spending there, and I don't recall having the discussion about having that reserve so low. Was the decision to do that just because it's landscaping and it's not as important as some of the other budgets that we have?
Well, and I think when the board established over a decade ago these reserve requirements, there was dialogue about the type of operation and what's funding the particular operation. So in this particular case, you have a very stable funding source, funding pretty routine type of expenses.
Yeah,
so
okay.
it's more of a manageable fund, and therefore your reserve requirement really can probably be lower. Where in the general fund, the dialogue of creating those reserve requirements higher, 75 to 100% of the operations, is that there's more variability there on the revenue side. Most of the revenue for the general fund comes from sales tax revenues. We talked about up to 60% of the revenues from sales tax. And then we have a unique condition on top of that most of our sales tax revenues comes from 2 retailers in town. So if something would happen to one of those retailers, and it would have whatever that would be, a negative ramification, a fire, a tornado, going out of business, whatever the case is, and we lost that sales tax revenue for a period of time, that would have a dramatic impact on funding our particular operations, thus the higher reserve level there.
Yeah, okay. So we've kept that revenue stream at the same level since it started, right? $30 for each resident, $25 for some, and $20 for others. So that certainly doesn't keep up with inflation, but we have, and we're showing here 5 years out that we're going to be running at a deficit. Have you guys discussed the possible of increasing those fees, and or do we just kind of use other surpluses to fund this?
Yeah, I think 2 things. Staff every year proposes rate increases in this fund, and every year I take them out.
Yeah.
Just because of the sensitivity to this fee in general.
Yeah.
And because of the balance we've had over the years, we're able to do that. The second thing is, as we see new residential come online in town, they'll be charged this fee, and so we'll start to see some new revenue come into this fund. And I think at the end of the 5-year time frame we're looking at now, we'll have a better idea of where we stand with this fund.
It seems like every year since we've been on the board, there's always been a surplus, because we've been under budget in some projects and we've actually realized more sales tax revenue. Is there a way that we can have a policy or something that funnels some of that money back to this year so we can keep the landscape fee?
Yeah, that's the other.
Because I don't want to get 10 years from now, if we have a 5% increase every year, all of a sudden for the landscape fee, then all of a sudden we're at $300 a month or whatever it might be.
That's the other. Yeah, the other thing. And a long-term outlook for the town, as we start to see some of these debt obligations expire, especially at the marketplace, where we'll see a infusion of $2.5 million a year into the general fund, and the transfer to SMD1 starts to go down even more and more. That means general fund has additional revenue, so that gives us more flexibility in maybe assisting this fund on a landscape basis, or capturing more of those expenditures in the general fund maintenance items.
So this is something you're considering on an ongoing basis?
Oh, yeah.
Out several years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. And again, this fund is solid through the 5-year period of time. There's nothing wrong with deficit spending, as long as we know what we're doing, as long as we have the reserves to handle it, and as long as we're meeting your board reserve requirements. So we feel that this is a manageable budget for the 5-year plan, but we just wanted to note that as we get out beyond the 5-year period of time, we'll have to make some of the adjustments, or we will need to evaluate some of those items that the manager identified and you as well.
Okay, thank you.
The next budget is trash and recycling, and we'll get through a number of these. These are just pass-through funds, essentially. The town provides trash and recycling services for Original Town, for the Ridge, for Calmonte, for Coal Creek Crossing. And we get billed by the provider for that particular service. We recover the fee from the residents through the utility bill, so it's just a pass-through. And I think Martin has gotten that fee, a very favorable fee, fixed through 2020. At that point in time, we're just showing that essentially the jump from 2020 to 2021 is to reflect that, hey, we'll be going out to bid and there'll be a new price that will pass through.
Since you started this off with, new housing coming over the next several years, including up to 1,400 units across the way, those contracts are going to grow substantially, aren't they? Is the timing for rebidding those going to be about right for capturing the growth of those contracts?
Yeah, I mean,
you're at a weakness if you just negotiate with somebody in place to increase the contract rather than competing it.
I think the town has a really good rate right now for the customers, for the residents. As new housing comes online, they're added to our contract automatically, just like the units in Calmonte are, as they get owners moving into those units. And I think it does line up well. We just renewed that, so we'll be up for rebidding in 4 years, and so we'll have additional units. And so my hope is we'll be able to keep the rate close to what it is now.
So the more units you have that actually can, you've got more economies of scale that you can bring that price down. It doesn't, I mean, is there a point where we can't get any better price?
I wouldn't expect the rate to go down, but maybe it helps to keep it close to the same level.
Okay.
Yep.
But we're not adding, did you say the town center though? Are we adding that to
Yes.
ours?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I thought the Metro District over there was going to do it.
No,
Okay, so that Superior Town Center residents would be added to the town's
Yes.
waste collection?
All new housing is going to be part of the town's, everything outside of Rock Creek till that changes. It's going to be town's responsibility.
multifamily,
Yeah.
like Bell Flatirons or something like that.
So Joe, how did you know that? I mean, have we gone over that? I must have.
I thought it was the Metro District over there was going to
Well,
deal
we
with it.
we
Yeah.
passed in the 2008 time frame an ordinance that said the town takes over trash collection except for existing, which was the.
Oh, really?
That was the Rock
Yeah.
Creek, and Rock Creek is that home HOA has extended their contract to avoid falling into that town taking it over.
Because I was unaware.
Yeah, that goes back, I mean, there was almost a recall of the town board at the time of passing that. Prior to that, everybody outside of Rock Creek had to make their own deal for trash collection. So all of the little pockets.
Was that the one that failed on the first vote, and then the next week there was another vote, next meeting there was another vote, and it passed? Was that controversial thing?
Yeah, I think that was part of it.
I
that
heard
might have
about
been
it.
part of it.
Okay.
Those were the good old days, right?
But we haven't had a recall
Recalls
since
and-
then, or a threat of a recall since then.
Knock on wood, right?
I wasn't aware, though, that because they have 3 Metro Districts across in the Superior Town Center, that we were going to pick up
Yeah,
we
I
don't
wasn't.
do anything else
This
over there.
ordinance isn't related to metro districts.
Well, I know, but the Metro Districts kind
It's
of
not
supersede, don't
I don't believe it's a service identified in their service plan for the Metro Districts. Trash collection.
they? Well, when we talked about the housing units that were approved, we talked about trash collection and other things and
Yeah,
maintenance, and
getting
that
in
Metro
and out
District
and all
were
that.
going to
Getting in.
act like an HOA.
But I don't know if it really matters whether the Metro District manages
No,
it
I
or
don't
the
know
town of
either.
Superior.
Yeah, I don't think it matters. I just said this was the first I heard that
Okay.
we were going to,
Yeah.
as a town, be responsible for collecting trash
Well,
within the Metro, Superior Town Center
theoretically,
Metro District
it would be a
area.
good thing from a sustainability point of view, that if we had control of everything, we could start looking at things like
Yeah.
pay to throw and pay to throw. Yeah, we're not doing pay to play till the election time. But
No, having a single hauler in town makes the most sense.
Absolutely right.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've seen Littleton, my sons, they've got a hauler coming through every day.
Oh, it's
picking up 3 or
crazy.
4 houses
It's-
in
yeah.
each street.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Next budget is our interchange, Superior McCaslin Interchange District, otherwise known as SMID. We have 2 funding sources for this particular budget. One is property tax, and in this year, it's going to be 15 mils. That's a decrease from a couple of years ago. And then in addition to that, this fund receives a dedicated sales tax of 0.16%, generating, what does that generate, Jeff? Maybe $500,000 a year between SO and sales tax, close to $500,000 a year. And again, as a reminder on that, and you'll see it in the column A there, that sales tax was 20 years only, so that'll run through 2022. And then the intent after that point in time is that any ongoing maintenance and maintenance capital expenses will be covered by that property tax. So it's something that we look at, similar to the dialogue and the landscape fee, that there'll be a point in time here, 7 years out or 6 years out, where we will no longer have that sales tax, and we'll just need to ensure that we have the revenues to cover the appropriate expenses. Alex has, and why don't you talk about the grant revenue there, Alex, and how that comes into play?
One other thing, we do a contract with CDOT, so they pay us $29,000 to maintain the traffic signals and the signing and striping, both on Marshall and on the interchange. The grants, remember we had gotten a $600,000 grant for the BRT to Coal Creek connection. That project's underway. We expect to get reimbursed about $500,000 this year, and then part of this 170 is the other $100,000 from the $600,000. And then the 630 plus that 70,000 is the BRT station up the Davison Mesa Trail. So those funds become available October 1 of 2017. So we anticipate starting design next year and getting some of the funds back, but the bulk of that would come in 2018. So that's what the grant funding, and then the expenditures. I have a placeholder here of about $50,000 just for any follow-up items on the interchange. A couple of things that have come up are, as you recall, the flash issue we had, and the way to solve that really is a UPS system at the crossover intersection, so we could do that. We've also had requests for additional signal heads because the overhead signals are not visible. So there's things like that follow up that I want to have a placeholder to draw upon. 80,000 is still the amount, the placeholder we have for the art on the underpass. We really haven't gone much farther with that, pending the art committee on that.
That's for the art?
For the art, right.
I think that needs to be made clear in the title.
Yeah, I think this.
Likely
gets left
underpass
over.
art at McCaslin.
The 100,000 is the finishing off of the trail connection. Landscaping will probably be carried over into 2017. And then we do have some wayfinding funds here for around the BRT station. This is the start of the 100,000 and 900,000. That's the start of the trail up to Davison Mesa. And in conjunction of that, if you remember, we wanted, this is the payment back to Louisville once we got a way to get to there. What I don't have here, I think Open Space had talked about a crossing of Marshall somewhere. I don't have anything of that budgeted in terms of flashing lights or signals to get across Marshall so you can get up to the Davison Mesa.
That's a project that ProStack is really keen on doing.
Right.
And they'd like the town board to give some kind of direction on whether they should move forward and look into that. We addressed that real quickly at the last board meeting, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a Boulder County driven project with CDOT as well, because Marshall Road's a state highway. And then the city of Louisville is involved as well, so
Yeah.
seems like it would be an easy issue to kind of try to resolve, but it's going to take some time to work through all those groups.
That's the one we discussed at the last meeting, that they're really having some design budget discussions, I think,
Yeah.
about which way to go and how
You
to
mean
do it.
last joint issues?
Yeah. Louisville and Superior has been talking to, correct me if I'm wrong, has been talking to the county and CDOT about doing this, but the
Yeah,
county...
we did two things. We actually looked at the feasibility of an underpass right near the Davidson Mesa underpass on the 36 of going under Marshall. Unfortunately, the alignment would actually head towards the west. Didn't seem like it was benefiting Superior residents, so it didn't make sense for us to take the lead on that. So we have a feasible alignment, but we think Boulder County and Louisville should take the lead on that. So that's one thing. And then, or if you want to do something up by 76th with flashing lights or a traffic signal, that could be another possibility to get to our new trail for Original Towns residents to get to it. We don't really have that in the budget, and that would probably be our cost if it was down by 76th.
Yeah, that's different, yeah.
So we would have to have Louisville, I could see CDOT, we'd have to have Louisville involved in that discussion if we wanted to put a crosswalk with flashing lights at 76.
At 76, it's a little bit different animal than what
Yeah, I mean,
we
we
were talking
could do
about.
that, but it would be in conjunction with CDOT.
Yeah, the other part was talking about right at the Davidson Mesa.
Yeah,
and
so
connecting.
we've been talking about this since the discussions, when we first started discussions about putting that tunnel there and how dangerous that is for people to cross there. So can we at least give ProStack some direction on, to start looking into that? Because they want to do that and they recognize the issue there.
At 76?
Yes.
The board wants to give them that direction, yeah.
Before the board gives ProStack direction, this is equally important to OSAC, because the whole purpose of that underpass is to connect regional trails. So let's, yeah.
Yeah, connecting the trails is great, but the safety of anybody crossing is greater need. So whatever it takes, I think that we have to have that discussion because it's far overdue.
Our most recent meeting with Louisville and Boulder County, Louisville's brought forward some proposed trail alignments. Once you get to the underpass, then what do you do? And I think that getting those designs in front of both committees will be a good start in the conversation. As I know that Louisville's committees are also starting to look at initial alignments. The trails are going to be fairly expensive. I think the first number that we were maybe seeing just for the trail, not even for a crossing, was getting close to $1 million. So maybe a good place to start would be with the alignments into open space and maybe where those trails would sit.
But that's still a different animal than the 76th Street crossing that ProStack has been talking about to get to our trail from Davidson Mesa down.
Yeah, we have to have that discussion because I'm not sure how interested the board as a whole is in spending or being a part of upwards of $1 million expense. But I think I would have to believe the board is very interested in making sure our residents can cross at some point safely.
And so the trail that we're talking about from the BRT to Davidson Mesa won't be constructed until 2018, right? So is ProStack's interest or the interest for this crossing to
I get
be at the same time as the construction of the trail?
What's there now? There's nothing there now, right?
There's a bike lane.
There's
bike lane.
There's a shoulder.
There is a bike lane.
There's a lot of biking on Marshall.
Well, I think that, I can't speak for ProStack, but I would imagine that since there is a bike lane there, there's pedestrian and bicycle traffic that we'd be interested in sooner than later putting some kind of safe crossing at 76th, in addition to putting a bike lane, striping a bike lane along 76th. That was their discussion at the last meeting.
It definitely is going to need CDOT.
On 76 to put a bike lane? Okay, so 76 having a bike lane, but then also a
Marshall,
crossing, some
right.
kind of crossing at Marshall.
I mean, we could do that right now if we put a
On
crosswalk, but we don't have any protection for it.
Right.
The other thing we could do is, work with ProSAC and OSAC to talk about what type of crossing do we want, rapid flashing beacons or some other devices, and we could budget some funds, 20 or 30,000. And if it's more than that, maybe seek a grant through CDOT for, a more
Or our friends
enhanced
at
crossing.
Dr. Cog.
I tell you, on Marshall, if you put beacons, you're going to get somebody killed there if they rely on it.
Right, and that's something we'd
Yeah.
have to work out with CDOT.
At 76 is better than where it turns right
Right.
by the underpass. That's really dangerous there. So now, you have 900,000 for the Davidson Mesa Trail connection. So we're getting 600 and some 80 or some.
700,000.
700,000 from Dr. Cog. So our portion is another $200,000 match, or is it going to cost $900,000?
We had $1 million. So
$1 million to make that trail connection from
No,
the.
because it'll be a concrete trail between Marshall and US 36, going all the way up from the BRT station all
Yeah.
the way
On
to
the north
Davidson
side
Mesa.
of Marshall.
And the reason why it is because we have some steep slopes there.
Oh, okay. So
Right.
it's going to cost a lot more than what we got, than we thought when we got the funds from Dr. Cog? Because we have 680,000 or something? or-
697,000 is what we got
From Dr. Cog.
and then 20% match, and I put about another 50 grand for unforeseen.
Jeff,
Okay.
we scroll up to the revenue.
So that's $1 million for that, which I thought that 700,000 was a lot, but, okay.
Everything
But it's a
else.
good trail connection from the BRT to that underpass. We have to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just kind of,
Yeah, the
again,
past does nothing for us otherwise.
it does nothing for us,
Right.
yeah.
That's right.
That doesn't include the money that you said we have to pay to, that was a separate line item that we paid to, there you go.
And we don't
To
pay that
Louisville.
unless we get the connection.
Right.
So wanna
You
say
know,
that?
this is complicated enough that maybe we should add it to a retreat and see, I'd like to see the, if nothing else, a Google map of the area and talk this through, because there are a couple of other considerations. One is, this is actually a traffic issue as you round Marshall there coming into town, and you have that slowdown in speeds.
35 mile an hour.
And so it could help us accomplish a more gradual slowdown. And then the other thing is this alternative alignment that was put by the people doing the FLAP grant on the Rocky Mountain Greenway. They were very interested in tying into our trail system to get over to the 36 highway trail system. And so when we talked about that, there may be some federal money to massage that connection. So whether or not that alternative alignment ever goes forth, we don't know, but that's a thing to keep in the back of our minds, that there may be yet another way to think about this. So I'd like to see this all illustrated. What are we thinking we want to accomplish?
So, as far as ProStack and what they're requesting, do we wait for a retreat to have this discussion and give them direction, or are we?
I think so. It's next
allowing them
month.
The
I mean,
opportunity to
it's-
start looking into things now.
When is their next retreat?
October.
We're 10th, and I don't know if this is on their work plan, but we would need to change that too. If you want to give them direction now.
Yeah.
I think let's discuss it at the retreat.
And then below, so those were capital items, and below we just have operating and maintenance items from Parks and Public Works, and I'm not sure if we really have any material changes going on down there. So if no staff comments, unless the board has any questions.
Just a question on the diverging diamond, $50,000. What left? What kind of construction do we still have?
It's follow-up items, UPS for the crossovers. We could have additional signal heads on the posts. And
UPS being the battery backups.
Right,
So
right. So there are other things, just a placeholder in case other things came up. I've got a number of requests about different signing and striping, but I didn't want to follow up on until the project's closed out, and then we could evaluate how it's operating, whether, some minor tweaks that need to be done.
Who has to repair the guardrail that gets destroyed by an accident?
I think it was on the ramp, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was CDOT.
Okay, that's good.
Next,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Chris.
Yeah, then the bikeway underpass in McCaslin. So this is $80,000 on by the Arts Committee is being spent, but we still are going to review. I mean, we don't have anything, we haven't seen anything yet, right?
The next thing to come before the board will be a review of the RFP.
Okay. And I'm sorry, again, the traffic signal system upgrades that we heard about, we got the grant for, but we have we're spending money. And I thought that the $140-some thousand was going to cover everything, but that's not the case.
No, that was just the equipment, purchase of the equipment, and if there's any installation that goes along with that, we would have to do that. There may be
So it's a study, isn't it, to make sure it's all synchronized, and then the equipment for it?
Right.
But then actually installing it is up to us to actually do.
So we're getting a grant for $142,000, and then we're spending $55,000 of our own money for it.
Mhm.
Okay.
Which we spend more than that just trying to get people out and to fix it, and then when we have problems, and, so this is really an advantage, a significant advantage to the town, instead of us having to come up with that $142,000.
Yeah, no, I get it, but I just thought that I heard that $142,000 covers everything, so.
Well, there was
that's
no
not the
match
case.
requirement. Usually, Dr. Cog requires a 20% or 30% federal, you have to match the federal funds, but in this case, there's no match required. But in essence, you're matching it, you're doing your own local match by installing it, paying for the installation
And
of it.
is Louisville has roughly the same expense on their end? $55,000 to install on their end?
No, they would have to budget any additional expense for their installation. The 55 is only on our side.
So the answer is yes.
So, so we're not paying additional $55,000 to install the whole thing?
No.
Just on our side? And then
That's
they got a
correct.
budget separate?
That's
Okay.
correct.
So any other if there are no other questions on the interchange operating and maintenance budget, we'll just hop to the interchange debt service budget. And this is essentially debt service for the first phase improvements back in 05, 06. And we just have some ongoing debt through 2024. And this is actually supported exclusively by the property tax mill levy that's dropped quite a bit over the last couple of years because of the debt refunding we did in 2015 or whenever the heck we did that one. Next budget is, so these next couple of budgets are, again, what we call clearing accounts that we just need for the revenue share agreement we have between the town, the District Number 1, and the Urban Renewal Authority to share sales tax revenues from the marketplace. So generally, this talks about the marketplace will generate general purpose revenues next year of about $5.9 million, and then we then move that money out, and a chunk of that will go to the town and SMD1, and then the remaining amount will be there to service the debt and outstanding liabilities, outstanding developer obligations for the infrastructure and installation and paying them back for that. So again, a clearing account, marketplace money coming in, and it goes out to pay some debts and to the general fund. Then specifically, we have a budget for the payment of the outstanding debt in the marketplace. So we have an actual debt service payment of about $1 million a year. That'll go through 2019. And Jeff, if you can go out and kind of show how this plays out. So the debt gets paid off at 2019, no more paying of the debt, and then we use the monies generated that are obligated to the payback the developer for their public improvements exclusively on this line. And this is the line that effectively after 2021 will have those obligations paid off, and then potentially that, all things being equal, that $2.5 million will be freed up to come back to the town. So again, a positive story there. Next budget is for, again, the Urban Renewal Authority, and instead of the sales tax component of the Urban Renewal Authority, which happens in the Superior Marketplace, we have the property tax component of the Urban Renewal Authority that happens over in the Superior Town Center. So these are something called the TIF, or tax increment property tax revenues. So we are gathering incremental property tax revenues from the Superior Town Center, and most of those monies then are going back to the developer and to the Metro District to pay for public improvements. So we are showing, Jeff, I'm sorry, back up top here, revenues of roughly $1.4 million, and the payments, most of the payments, again, per the developer agreements to pay back public improvements, most of those go back to the developer and the Metro Districts. And then we also have some provisions that if there's any increases, so in 2013 we identified that Boulder County, Boulder Valley School District, and the town had base property tax base mill levies, the mill levy at that particular time. And then we agreed, though, that if that mill levy, if that property tax rate actually increased above the base, we agreed with the developer that those taxing entities would receive, Boulder County and Boulder Valley School District would receive any additional property tax revenues that were above their base mill levy. So we have a small component of the budgets next year that reflect that. And I guess an easy way to think of it is we had Boulder Valley School District do their bond mill levy or their bond election, and as a result have increased their mill levy. So we are capturing the revenues above their base mill levy and giving that back to them. I'm sorry, this is very, very long-winded. So we have that component, and the additional component, we've got an agreement with, where's the fire department? Agreement with Rocky Mountain Fire to reimburse them up to 10 mills of their 21, 22 property tax mills to provide to help provide service in the town center.
Paul, what are the treasurer collection fees?
So with any property taxes that are assessed by the town, this is with the Urban Renewal Authority. So essentially, the county looks at it as the town. They're collecting revenues, property tax revenues for the towns, for the town because of the Urban Renewal Authority capturing incremental property taxes. So, county is collecting property taxes for us in the Urban Renewal Authority. They're also collecting property taxes for us in the general fund, in District 2 and District 3. And they just have a standard fee that they charge us to collect those revenues and remit them to us. So that's what that line is, and you'll see that in 3 or 4 different budgets.
So the big increase is because now that property is increased in value because it's not farmland anymore.
Right, they're collecting more revenues. So yeah, we had a couple things going on. We had the revaluation from ag to commercial use, and then now, and just with vacant ground, and now as we get building on there, that property value will increase anymore, will increase additionally, and then the treasurer collection fee is a fixed fee. It's what, 1.5% here maybe, Jeff? So it'll be 1.5% of all revenue they will retain. So again, this gets to a clearing account. So we get a bunch of revenues. The Urban Renewal Authority collects a bunch of property TIF revenues, and then those are distributed according to the agreements we have in place. So that's why, zero at the end, but we need to budget for those particular items. Next 2 budgets we have are the residual debt for District 2 and District 3. We've had some dialogue on this. Both of those will go away after 2028, and that property tax is exclusively to pay that existing debt, so that that property tax will in fact go away. So we're approaching 12 o'clock, Mr. Magley and Mayor. I don't know if we want to continue into the enterprise operations. Maybe as a follow-up to the board, Shannon had sent out a doodle poll looking if, in fact, we needed a third meeting, and looking at that doodle poll and talking to the board, the additional board members who didn't have an opportunity to respond. It looks like we've been able to identify another meeting date if, in fact, we need it for next Wednesday, September 7th, from 9 to 12. So that's another thing to consider as we consider moving forward here.
And I wouldn't think we would need 3 hours to get through the.
How much
District
more
one.
do you anticipate we have total?
We probably have an hour and a half.
Okay.
I can't stay. If you're thinking about
No,
extending
the
to
next meeting.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, that's it.
No, next,
Okay.
Next Wednesday.
How long will?
We
Okay.
could schedule from 9 to 11 or
I
something.
had still scheduled 9 to 12, and then,
Oh, yeah.
and then if
Yeah.
we get done early, that's
stay
great.
until the bagels are done.
Hey, Matt,
Okay, so is the question pause now and then just pick up Wednesday?
Yeah, rather than getting into District 1
Okay,
and
what's-
stopping in the middle of it.
Is that good with everyone? I'm good with that.
But can I ask one more question? It goes back to yesterday, Matt, that I didn't actually ask, I don't think. There was a surplus of $800,000, but part of that surplus was miscellaneous revenue from FEMA of $500,000. Didn't we anticipate that $500,000 was going to be provided to us? So if it was anticipated, that wouldn't necessarily be surplus, right? I mean, we didn't budget that in, that it was going to, we receive that?
I'll let Paul.
I'm sorry, Trustee Hanson, I lost the last part of that, so.
Back to the surplus part.
Yeah, back to the very beginning, we had a surplus of $800,000, but part of that was $500,000 from FEMA,
From the 213
from the flood.
Mhm.
Didn't we anticipate that? Wasn't that part of a budget before, that we knew we were going to get that $500,000, or no?
We, I think, have been conservative as it relates to the timing and the amount, so I don't think that we had not actually factored that into the budget. And now that we know, for sure, and are going through the reimbursement process, that $225,000 is now being included.
Okay.
And that obviously attributes or helps generate any surplus we may have in the general fund in 2016.
Okay, 225 or 500?
Oh, so are we looking, we may not be looking at the same thing. I'm looking at the FEMA reimbursement for the general fund. Are you looking at a reimbursement within the storm drainage account?
Well, I'm just looking at, on this page in our booklet, it says, what's the title? General fund surplus deficit.
Okay, right.
And it says that for 2016, staff is projecting a total general fund surplus of $800,000.
So Jeff, go to, there.
And my question is, weren't we aware that we were going to receive a $500,000 reimbursement from FEMA for our efforts of flood?
It says flood event and the sale of town property. I think.
So let's kind of look, so
Oh, I
we're,
got you, Joe, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
So it's a total of the two things.
total of the two things, and at the end of the day, we are looking, and now I'm on the general fund expense summary there, and now we're looking, instead of a total surplus of $128,000 in 2016, now the new estimated surplus between, looking at all factors, but the important factors there are probably the new revenues from the FEMA reimbursement, as well as everything else, sales tax up and
We didn't
down.
anticipate selling that property at the time, I got it.
Right, so
Yeah.
so now the net effect, and again, good story here, we budgeted for a $100,000 surplus, now we've got over $500,000 surplus.
Okay, thank you.
And again, what we're proposing is, anything that is not needed in the general fund, we use it to fund our capital program.
Okay, good.
Okay, so next Wednesday, 9 a.m. to noon.
Send out a calendar invite to the board, just so you can have it on your calendar, and I'll include it in the digest, and we'll do it all, hopefully wrap up on next Wednesday.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.